it'll start a recording for both of us, and what I can do here is I can put this up on YouTube later on a private link, and then you'll have
Okay,
access to it.
perfect.
So you don't need to worry about that. Now, first off, I want to say again, I'm not a medical doctor and I'm not an expert on focal dystonia, but I have worked with people who have excessive tension, and I do know anatomically what's happening in your body. Whether neurologically, I don't know, psychologically, I don't know, but I can talk about what's happening anatomically, and I can tell you about the muscular activations that are working. Okay?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to.
And
I'd
at
love to
the
know it.
very
Thank you, man.
least, I think that might be some use to you. Okay? So, what I normally do when I take on students is I show them, a little video back if they're playing, and I talk about, what I see. The first thing I want to point out here, would you mind if I shared screen and just showed you your two
Oh
videos and
yeah,
just show you
yeah.
something here? So if I share screen here and I go to my browser, the video might go a little bit, my face might go a little bit blurry or whatever, but here, I want you to notice right when you start playing this Holdsworth solo, right? Just look at your hand position before you ever start playing. Your wrist is straight and your hand is in a very, very relaxed, comfortable posture before you've ever played a note. Okay?
Hmm.
And this to me, if I were teaching somebody, I would be trying to get them to do this. Okay? Your hand position here is very beautiful. Like I said, beautiful. Okay? And, it's what I think has maybe happened. Again, I'm not an expert in focal dystonia, but if it is a case that this is a habituation of tension and a disorder caused by anxiety or something like that, rather than something neurological, for example, like people have bad speech patterns, like stutters and things like that, is often caused by social anxiety. So it could be related to anxiety and just habituation of bad form. Okay, which is something interesting. If we switch over to the other one here, before you ever start playing here, okay, your hand position is completely different.
Mm.
So you'll notice here that your fingers are spread.
Bit of a kink there.
Yeah, your fingers are spread. Okay, so they're kind of spread like this. Okay, you've got a much more severe bend in your wrist, and your thumb is drawn into opposition. Okay, now that's a pretty
Mm.
shocking difference for somebody who hasn't even started playing yet. Okay, so your approach to the instrument has changed. Okay, now that's an interesting little thing because that means that anything that you try to do from here is inherently going to be less effective than anything that you start trying to do from here. Okay, now I don't know if the reason that you're adopting this form is, again, if it's neurological, I don't know. Okay, but what I can say is this form is inherently anatomically less viable than that one. Okay, and I'll try to explain some reasons why. Okay, so before you've ever even started playing, I'm noticing a difference in your posture. Okay, another thing I noticed throughout this video here, again, your playing is beautiful, and there are moments when your fingers, there are manifestations of the lack of independence which exists in everybody's fingers, and you just go with it. Okay, you just let your body do what it needs to do. Okay, so for example, when you're going to be doing this hammer on here with this ring finger, if I slow this right down, okay, you'll notice that you're letting, right there is a fantastic example of you letting your little finger just follow along with the action of your ring finger. Okay, this curling here is not indicative of too much tension. In fact, it's indicative that you are loose and relaxed and letting the little finger follow along with the joint connective tissue between the two of these two fingers. Okay, so I'll try to explain some of the. Yeah, now, what I think might have you ever done like a lot of like finger independence work or that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I always used to do those like Petrucci,
Yeah,
rock discipline kind of things. One, two, three, four. Lots of that. Hours
yeah.
and hours and hours of that.
What may have happened, I don't know, is that you had begun to identify this lack of independence which exists in everybody, and you tried to force it to go away. And
That
that
sounds about
that that is definitely not going to work. okay? Because you cannot fight your own anatomy and win, okay? Now, if it's again, this could be a methodology of action, okay? But this is how your hand is supposed to work, okay? When you hammer here with your ring finger, because there is shared connective tissue between your ring finger and your pinky finger, this finger has to move as well. It's the only way you could prevent that is by forcing an opposing muscular action, which is problematic for reasons that I'll explain in a moment. Okay, um, but this I think is beautiful. This is what I would be trying to get people to achieve. Okay, you'll notice here that as your pinky finger is going to be required to play a note, your ring finger straightens out. Okay, and you are really just letting that these three finger combinations work absolutely beautifully here. Okay. Now what I think is that you weren't satisfied with what you had considered maybe as being extra movement. Okay, and you tried to force
Mm.
your hand to do something unnatural. Now I'll talk about um, this other video. Okay, again we're seeing a different posture. Okay, so we can see that the fingers are spread like this. Okay, so they're already held in a position of tension. Your thumb is drawn away from your index finger towards your middle finger, like this. That creates tension in the thumb for reasons I'll explain in a moment. And the bend in your wrist is much more severe. Okay, the bend in your wrist here is right here. You can see that that's nearly 45 degrees, I'm going to guess, from this front angle. Okay, so you have found a posture which is much more tense by default, okay, before you've ever even started playing, okay? And you'll notice here this middle finger is it's abducted, which means it's pulled to the side like that. You see that?
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, your middle finger, when your hand is at rest, will run in a straight line through the palm and down into your wrist. Okay. So in
Right.
that sense, the middle finger of your hand is kind of like its center. Okay. And what you're trying to do here is force yourself off center. Okay. And as we play through here, now you can see here that you're starting to curl at the first joint. See these first joints here?
Mm-hmm.
Starting to
Yeah.
curl at these first joints, and then this finger curls up naturally. Okay. Now, why does that happen? Well, the reality is that the muscle which controls this last joint of your finger, okay, is not individual for each finger. In fact, you only have one of them, and if you apply it for one muscle, for one finger, you apply it for all of them. Okay. Now, that means that fingers cannot be independent, and finger independence work is inherently a terrible idea. Okay. So I would like you to get the idea that this is caused by some lack of finger independence, or that you would ever solve this with finger independence exercises, just out of your head. It's just not. It's just not true. It's just not anatomically real. Okay. So I'm seeing fairly strong pressure here coming at that first joint. Okay. But also, can you see your middle finger here? This first joint is pretty much in a straight line with your palm. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that means that you have flexion at this last joint of your finger here, while you have extension at this first joint. Okay. Yeah.
So
Whereas
you're saying how this joint is like
this that
parallel
joint is
there.
that joint is largely extended. Same with
Yeah.
your and this joint here, this last joint is flexed. Okay.
Okay.
Now, the reality is that you only have one muscle which can extend here. Okay. And wouldn't you know it, it's a common muscle for every finger. Okay.
Mm.
So what you are doing is you have simultaneous opposing flexion in the last joint of the finger, okay, with extensions at the first joint, okay? And what you are doing is you are activating two muscle groups which oppose each other and which only work on all fingers simultaneously, okay? And what's really interesting about these two muscles is that they're strong, okay? They're powerful, okay? And it may not even feel like you're doing something which is tight or strenuous or difficult at all. The muscle which closes the last joint of your finger like that, that's your primary gripping muscle. Okay? And you're a fairly athletic looking guy, so I think you could probably do pull-ups, right? So
That's right. Yeah.
you can support your entire body weight with one of these grips. Okay? You are never going to to feel that the muscle which contributes to this activation here is going to get tired. Okay? It's everything else fighting against it that is struggling to work. Okay? So anatomically, that's what's happening. Now, why it's happening is something I can't be sure of. Okay? I don't know if it's habituation, anxiety, the same way that some people develop, stutters or something like that based on social anxiety, and when they cure their anxiety, the speech impediment goes away. I don't know. But anatomically, this is happening. Okay? And it wouldn't matter what signals you were sending from your brain, neurological or not, your hands simply can't move in this way without these muscular activations. Okay? That's a fact. Okay? And that's something that so if I, as somebody with, functioning hands who does not currently have this condition, if I were to try to adopt the positions you're taking here and activate the muscles that you're activating, I would have exactly the same result. Okay? It would be
Hmm.
difficult, it would be strenuous, and I wouldn't be able to control it. Okay? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take away this screen share here, and I'm going to show you some things with my hands, and maybe you can follow along. I'm not going to pick up a guitar at all for a little while. I just wanted you to convince you of how your hands work. Okay?
Okay,
And
sure.
then I think maybe you might be able to approach the guitar in a different way. Okay? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to switch my camera. I have another one here which should be on my hands.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That work? Okay.
Yeah.
So, like I said, you have extension here at this joint. Okay. Now, the muscle which does this is in your forearm. It's in the extensor component here. It's called extensor communis. And communis means for everything, communal. Okay. Common to all.
Okay.
Okay. Now, that extension there means that I would have constant tension up here. Okay. Now, when you have a separate, I don't want to say independent, you have a separate or individual extensor for your pinky finger, but it really only does about that much. Okay? Okay, so you might be able to do that. Okay? If you try to do that with your ring finger, you'll notice you have to hold your middle finger into your palm or it will want to pop out as well.
What were you trying to do there?
So if I try to, see the way I can pop out my little finger like that?
Hmm.
Okay, if I try to do that with my ring finger, I have to hold my middle finger into my hand with using the meat of my thumb. If I try to
Okay.
do
Same with the pinky. So if I try to go further than this, it kind of pulls the ring.
exactly, it wants to pull, and the reason for that is that you have some degree of individual extension here, but the tendons are most of the time in most individuals actually fused. Okay,
Right.
so you have a little bit of slack, but not very much. And if I try to pop my pinky up fast with no tie to the table, you can see that it pulls my ring finger up a little bit with it. Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now that's just how your hand works. Okay? That's just connection of anatomical tissue. Okay? I can't fight that. The only way that I can stop my ring finger moving is to hold it with my flexors at the same time. So that makes the job of extending my pinky even harder. Right? So now instead of having one loose action of a pinky coming up, I would have the tight action of curling all my fingers and then trying to pull against that force. Okay?
Mhm.
So trying to hold
So
myself in
opposing motions, like you said.
yeah, what I'm doing is I'm generating opposing forces in opposing structures. Now, the only finger that actually has some degree of actual independence, and I don't want to say independence, but I mean some more degree of uh, it has less influence from the other fingers than all of the others is your index finger. Okay, and the
Mm.
index finger actually has quite a good individual extensor. So that's why you can point your index finger very comfortably, and it's why pistols are designed to work like this.
Mm.
You can pull that finger.
Yeah.
If you tried to operate a pistol by using any other finger, your grip on the gun would would become weak and loose, and the recoil forces would knock the gun out of your hand. But with your index finger, that's actually possible because you have a good individual extensor, okay, for the index finger. Okay, so that's your extensors. You have common, a decent one for your index finger, and you have a kind of a weak one for your pinky, which is connected to your common flexor, sorry, common extensor. Okay,
So when you say the what would you call it? What did you what makes the finger come out?
so you have an extensor, a separate extensor muscle in
Yeah,
your forearm. It's called extensor indicis, okay, for index finger, and it's a separate
the
muscle.
extensor.
It's an actual different muscle than the one that can extend all of your fingers separately.
Okay, so when you say the one for the index and pinky are slightly better, does that just mean they're more
What I
individual
mean
here?
is, you have one that works for everything. It applies to all at the same time. Then you have one which can work individually on your pinky, but only for a limited range and only
Uh,
weakly. You have one that can only work on your index finger, and that one's quite good. But you do
okay,
not have individual independent action like this for every finger. That does not exist. Okay? Your body can't do that. Okay? And you cannot train that because the muscles aren't connected that way. Does that make sense?
yeah,
Okay? Now, flexion, on the other hand, is a little bit more complicated. Okay? So flexion, by which I mean, like flexing a bicep is bending, right?
right.
So, right, so you have these joints here, the large joints, the knuckle joints, like your punching knuckles, right? Then you
Hmm.
have the middle joints, and you have the last joints. I'm going to say big, middle, small. Okay, I'm going to minimize the anatomical jargon, right? So the big joint here, okay, is primarily operated by muscles called the lumbricals, and they're in the hand. They're actually here, okay?
Mm.
So if you try to do a bar chord, for example, where you're pinching like that, creating pressure, I'm sure you've done it on an acoustic guitar or something at some point in your life, and your hand got tired from holding it for a while, right?
Mm.
Right here. That's those muscles getting fatigued, okay? So
Okay.
that's these muscles getting fatigued. Now, here's the thing. These muscles, okay, have a pretty decent degree of independence. And the reason is because you have one for each finger, okay? But only at this joint, okay? And if you try to move them beyond a certain range, things happen, okay? Why do things happen? Well, because then you start influencing the tendons that are connected to the other joints, okay? So you have a little bit of independent flexion near your resting hand, okay, like that. Independent, a little bit of independent flexion, a little bit of independent ability to fire off these ones here. This middle joint here, okay, like that one. Can you see me bending there?
Yeah.
Right? That middle joint, that joint there, your middle joint, that's one muscle for all, okay? But it has individual branches which go to each finger, okay? And the individual branches, okay, allow you to activate one finger. It will pull the others with it slightly. Can you see that? If I do it fast, it snaps the other ones down,
Hmm.
right? But when you do that, okay, you're able to recover back into extension again. So what I'm not doing here is I'm actually not flexing this finger separately. I'm flexing down and then recovering the extension in the other fingers. Okay,
Okay.
so, right? And if you do this, if you try to bend at the middle joint of your middle finger, let's say, while keeping the other fingers straight, okay, just play with the tip of your finger here and you should notice that it's completely loose.
Yeah.
Yeah? That's because you cannot engage the muscle which does this last joint, without engaging it for all of them. Okay? And the muscle which does this last joint, the small joint, we have a tendency to think that small means weak, but actually this is by far the strongest joint in your body, in your grip. Okay? The flexor which does this is called flexor digitorum profundus. It's deep in the arm, okay, and it's one muscle, and it either fires for everything or it fires for nothing. Okay? Now, what does that mean? Well, let's say, for example, here, I want you to cross your fingers like this. Just put your finger pad to finger pad on your middle finger. And now try to create tension between your hands, and you'll notice that every other finger curls. You notice that?
Oh yeah.
You cannot avoid that. No one can.
My index can stay straight
Your index can stay straight, but that's
to
because
a
you've got
point.
that separate
Oh, yeah.
extensor. It's still being pulled on by the muscle here. Does that make sense? Right?
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about what this means for you as a guitar player. Okay, well, you are extending at this joint, which means your extensor is turned on. Okay? It's
An extension is, just to be
extension
clear.
is straightening.
Okay.
Extension is straightening out the fingers so that they're in line with the forearm.
And
Okay?
would extension in the wrist be that
That's
way?
extension in the wrist, but I'm talking about extension in the fingers.
Right.
All
Okay.
right? So you have your fingers extended at this first joint, which means this extensor here for your fingers, the common one, is turned on. Okay?
Okay.
And you have flexion at the last joints of your fingers, right? Which means that your big common flexor, the strongest one in your body, is turned on. Okay, and
The
this
one
is
that you
just
said was down
sorry,
here.
it's down
The
here in
one
your
that you mentioned
yeah,
was
it's
down here. Okay.
yeah. So have you ever just tried hanging on a bar for a couple of like 90 seconds or something and started to feel a
Sure.
burn here?
Yeah.
That's the one you're feeling. Okay,
Okay.
okay. And that's the muscle which is activating. You will never tire that muscle out playing guitar. It's impossible. Okay? It's far too strong. But turning on that muscle will absolutely negatively impact all of the other smaller, weaker muscles of the hand and their ability to function. Okay? So
Okay.
you have turned on the two most powerful muscles which activate your fingers, okay, without ever even playing the guitar. Okay? So you have set yourself up to fail. Okay? Now, this, I think, is coming from either you were chasing economy of motion, okay, and trying to make
Definitely.
your movement small, or you were trying to chase finger independence and get your fingers to work separately from each other. But
Both. Yeah.
economy of motion doesn't make sense for a reason I'll explain in a moment. And also, fingers anatomically are not independent. You cannot have independent fingers. Okay? All you can do is allow them to have a position where they can act with as much individual freedom as they have. Okay? But you cannot train them to be independent, and you should never have that goal. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay? And
Yes.
if you ever need proof, just try to do that and try to straighten out your ring finger while holding that position. It is absolutely impossible. It cannot be done. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay? Now, again, I don't know why you're turning those two muscles on, okay? But if it's anxiety and if it's coming from a position of trying to achieve finger independence or achieve economy of motion, then that might be why, okay? Now, why don't I think economy of motion is a good idea? Well, so economy of motion is based on the idea that a small movement is good, right?
Right.
Small means cheap, cheap means good, right? But actually, you don't live in an economy of movement where small makes good or small makes cheap. You live in an economy of movements where different movements are available at different times with dynamically changing costs. And the example
Hmm.
I always give to students is imagine you're like an electronics manufacturer, okay, and you need to make a component. So you need a conductor, okay? And you like there are different metals that conduct. Now, gold is a fantastic conductor. It's one of the best metals for conduction. Okay, so like you've seen these gold-plated guitar jacks and things like that, right?
Right.
So gold is a fantastic conductor, but it's expensive. Okay? Now you might be able to reduce your costs by using the smallest amount of gold, okay? And that might be necessary and it might be what you need to do. But copper is also a conductor, and copper is much cheaper than gold. And if you can use copper, you can use as much copper as you can buy. You can buy a huge amount of it before you will ever experience a cost that is similar to the cost of gold. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
Right? So what you are doing in your fretting hand is buying gold. You are trying to buy the expensive option when a cheaper option is available that you can use more of before you will experience any difficulty. Okay?
I
Does that make
understand.
sense? Right? The problem isn't that you're using too much gold or that you're using too much copper. The problem is you're using gold. You need to use the cheaper option. Okay? So this is one of I don't know if you've seen any of Troy's work. I know noticed that you joined up the forum, but I imagine that was just that you were searching for information on focal dystonia and you came across that post.
That's right. And I've seen
Yeah.
some. Yeah.
So one of the things Troy talks about, which is largely true, is that economy of motion is basically bullshit for that reason. Okay? You don't want movements that are small. You want movements that are large, powerful, and effortless. You want things that you can get a lot of for cheap. Does that make sense?
Mm.
If you're an electronics manufacturer, it is better for you to make things out of copper than gold. Gold works, gold is good, but it's expensive, right? The problem is you've tried to buy gold and you've got went all in on it, and what you keep trying to use the same things that you've been doing. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about this on a guitar. Okay, so
Okay.
this is a guitar here. Okay, and if I were to adopt your hand position, okay, where I extend here, okay, where I have my wrist bent like this, and I have flexion at these fingers like that, forcefully, now my hand is stiff and tired and I can't do anything at all. Like I would struggle to move effectively here, okay?
Well, you saw my, it seems to be the worst in the ring finger, but you
Yeah,
saw that it was actually causing me, and I left it that way on purpose, like that I was causing me to actually miss the string.
yes, yes. So what's happening here is that you have engaged this last joint, right? And because
Hmm.
you've engaged it strongly, okay, that finger starts curling. And I'm not thinking now about curling my ring finger. I'm thinking about squeezing hard and pressing down onto the guitar with my three
I'm,
remaining fingers.
I'm gonna grab one just because it might help.
Try it. Yeah. So I'm not I want you to be very clear on this. I am not thinking right now. I am not thinking, curl my finger. I am thinking squeeze or press with my other fingers, and that happens. In the same
What do you
way that we
mean?
did this. Yeah? So
Yeah.
why is that curl happening in my ring finger here? It's happening because there's a job or there's work to be done in my other finger. And if I adopt a bad hand position, one like you have with the bent wrist, now everything is so difficult just to get an effective fretting technique that my finger curls down. Okay.
Mm.
Now that I think is the root of your issue. Okay. And this is uh, I think the problem is that you were trying too hard to work towards two goals which don't make any sense. Being economy of motion, which we're all taught to think about, but it doesn't make any sense. Okay, because really it's not make a movement small, therefore it's good. It's do the cheap action, buy the right material, right? Buy
Right.
copper. Okay. So if I need to do this, if this is copper and I'm doing this, which is gold, okay, then of course I'm going to go broke immediately. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so small is not the answer. Okay, small is not the answer. Okay, the answer is easy. Okay, things that don't feel strenuous, things that are cheap. Okay, okay, so that the other one is finger independence, and fingers just aren't independent. And no amount of working on finger independence exercises or anything like that can ever make fingers independent. The only thing you can do is make your hands tired. Okay, and
Right.
create poor habituation. Does that make sense?
Right.
Okay, so and generally, it's been pretty well observed that like focal dystonia only happens in people who practice a lot. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't happen to the guy who picks up the guitar twice a week and then plays, pop covers in a top 40 band at the weekend. It doesn't happen to
Right.
that guy. It happens to you who, plays a Holsworth tune. It could have happened to me when I was, doing like I don't do a whole lot of covers anymore. I'm more focused on like trying to learn how to make my own vocabulary and things like that now. But
Mhm.
it could have happened to me as a teenager when I was playing, Paul Gilbert, Eric Johnson, working on some Sean Lane tunes or whatever. That could have been the person it happens to.
Sure.
Yeah, it doesn't happen to and the reason is, I think, that we obsess and we try to create solutions to problems that we've made for ourselves. Okay? Okay? So the problem is I can come up with all sorts of fantastic detailed solutions, really uh, elaborate and well thought out. But if the problem is something I'm making for myself, then the simple answer is just don't do the problem. Just don't make that happen
Right.
in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right? So um, I'll talk a little bit more about your hand positioning, and you'll notice we had your your wrist bent like this, much more significantly now than previous. Okay? And I think the reason for that is an attempt to get all four fingers onto the strings.
Yeah, to be, parallel in that
Yeah,
line, maybe.
yeah. Now, I think that that's stupid, okay? And the reason I think that's stupid is because in real guitar playing, you never put four fingers down in sequential frets unless you just want to play chromatic lines all of the time, okay?
Right.
So what finger independence exercises do is they train a hand position which does not apply to real guitar playing, okay? So
Mm.
the more of that work you do, the further you're actually getting away from a useful skill set. Okay. Much more common in guitar playing are three note per string groupings like this, right? Where we would have whole tone, half whole half, or whole half, right? Now I want you to notice something about my fingers here. When I do whole, let's say I'm doing whole here. This is the D note on the G string. I have the index, middle, and ring finger all on the G string. Where's the tip of my ring finger right now? It's right up near the A string. Can you
A
see that?
string, yeah.
Now, the reason that it's up near the A string is because I have extension in my pinky finger, and to accommodate that extension, I need extension in my fourth finger. Sorry, my ring finger. Does that make sense? If I start trying to curl this finger to be near the string, ready to go for a note that it's not going to play, then I'm making the job of the extensor on my pinky harder. And I'm also adding background tension everywhere in my hand because I'm activating this last joint. Okay, so
Mm.
trying to keep my fingers close is actually detrimental.
Yeah. And I
Okay,
feel like that's something that I've tried to fix. That
yeah,
specifically. Yeah, when
yeah.
you're doing that, you're like, yeah, let me get this down here. And I,
Yeah.
because I know that this has bothered me.
And
Mine
you
will
and
rest.
you have long fingers, and you're like me. Your ring finger is much longer than your pinky.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're like me. Your ring finger is like almost right up at the tip of your middle finger, right? So this is very pronounced for me, right? And it'll be very pronounced for you as well, right? But this is a completely relaxed and loose position of my hand, okay? Now another issue is I'm not the biggest fan in the world of 1, 3, and 4 together, okay? And I'll try to explain the reason why. The reason is that if I try to use 1, 3, and 4 together with this kind of hand position that you're using, I want you to notice what it does. You see that like D shape there between my,
Oh yeah.
yeah? You can see the extension in my pinky finger and the flexion in my ring finger, okay? Now that means that I have co-contraction. That means I have an extensor activated for the pinky and the common flexor applied for everything. So this shape with my hand is unnatural and requires muscular exertion just to achieve it. Okay? And the position that gets trained with a lot of these chromatic exercises, again, is going to require my hand to do that. You can see that same D shape there.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
there are people who can play very well who can play very well with these this third and fourth finger, but they don't adopt this hand position. Somebody like Paul Gilbert, for example, he tilts his hand extremely far this way. Okay, and
I've
now
noticed that. Yeah.
in this position, okay, I have very little mobility in my index finger. I can't move it very much, but my pinky and my ring finger, the difference between them in terms of flexion is much more balanced. And the reason is because there is much more flexion at this joint in the pinky to accommodate the extra flexion everywhere else on the ring. So that last joint of my pinky now, the big one, is much more flexed than it would be here. Okay, can you feel that?
Okay.
All right. So people who are good at 3/4, okay, they're not doing it from this parallel posture, okay, that you kind of end up doing with finger independence exercises, okay? They're doing it from a canted posture or an angled posture like that.
Like kind of more.
Yeah, like the really kind of severe Paul Gilbert thing. Rather than this for 3/4, they're doing like that,
Yeah.
right? That 3/4 here feels fine. If I try to just trill that, here it feels horrible and awkward and painful. Easy when it's angled, stiff and unpleasant and uncomfortable when it's parallel. Can you feel that difference in your hands?
Yeah, I don't hate it. I don't hate it like here, but it definitely seems improved there.
Yeah, but imagine you're trying to do that for 1,000 repetitions.
Oh, sure, and at high speeds and
Yeah,
very
yeah.
precise passages.
And remember now, you know, as somebody who can play fast, you know that, like, I mean, we do talk about, you need to minimize the effort and so on, but you also have to try. There is exertion when you play fast. Okay?
Sure.
It's we optimize the technique and we create efficiency, but ultimately, if you want to go faster, your muscles have to activate harder. That's just reality, because the power required to move your muscles fast enough to actually, land in time is higher than the amount of force that you would have to generate at a slower tempo. Okay, so there is a little bit more power involved, and making this as easy as possible means that I can do this all day, whereas this, I could probably do it for about 30 seconds to a minute, and then I would want
Mm.
to stop. Okay, so that's a note on 3/4. So I'm a much bigger fan of doing what I see Sean Lane doing, which is 1, 2, and 3. Okay, and the reason is when you do 1, 2, and 3, okay, the degree of extension in every finger is roughly similar. Can you see that? They're all roughly straight, pretty similar overall.
What would be the difference? The contrast to that of one, three,
The
four.
1, 3, 4
See your
here,
hand.
you
I
can
see your hand totally changes
see the
when you go to one,
D
three, four.
right here,
Ah,
right? And watch this, watch this. So I'm on the A string here. I'm playing the E note, right? My pinky finger is not in a position to do absolutely anything useful,
uh-huh.
right? So by making my hand comfortable, okay, I have sacrificed what I'm considering to be a fourth finger. But the reality is that the comfort in my hand and the low background of tension is worth more than an extra finger that I don't need. Okay?
Yeah,
Yeah? Right?
absolutely.
So um, it's not a needless sacrifice, it's a trade. Okay? You are trading a finger that you can't use very effectively in this position for a better, more comfortable position, but at the cost of this finger not doing anything useful. Now, whenever you watch, and I might be able to find a clip in your video because you actually do it too at certain points. When people do this kind of 1, 2, 3 position, this finger usually curls you were doing it like that. It usually curls underneath the fretboard like that. And you can see that it's actually following along here.
Which one? The pinky goes
Pinky
underneath the
finger
fretboard?
is underneath the fret, pretty much underneath the fretboard right here when I'm on the G string. It's
Ah,
here. All right, it's missing. If I try to fret with it, it misses the string entirely. Okay. And if I try to, if I'm trying to do, if you watch my hand here, if I'm trying to do any kind of a legato pattern with my these fingers actually act in unison.
together, yeah.
Now, this is not me having a lack of finger independence that is unusual. This is everybody's lack of finger independence. What I am just letting my pinky follow the movement of my ring finger and not creating a fight between them, like that. Okay? So in the same way that when we had this kind of straight posture and my 1, 2, 4, and my ring finger was pretty much up near the A string, like that, right?
Hmm.
So that I have roughly the same degree of extension in both the ring and the pinky. In this posture, I have roughly the same degree of flexion in the ring and the pinky, but now the pinky can't reach either. So in either position, I have one finger which can't reach, and I just let the finger that can't hit the strings just follow the movements of the other finger. Okay.
Okay. So the thing for me to clarify is, so you were saying having the same degree. I just get a little confused on extension and flexion in the
Yeah,
fingers now. So you were saying,
extension is the straightness, and flexion is the curl. So if you've got similar curl between all your fingers, that's good. If you've similar straightness between all of your fingers, that's fine. But if you have this happening,
so it's the disparity that's
it's the
something to kind of
disparity
watch
that's a
out.
problem because the only way that you can achieve that in your body is by turning on two big, powerful opposing muscle groups.
Okay.
Okay? And that is not something that your body wants. Okay? And it is not something that allows for any controlled individual action between your fingers using the other muscles because these muscles are too small and they're too weak compared to the other muscles involved. Okay? The muscles in your hand, the ones that do this, are nowhere near powerful enough to fight the muscle here or here. Okay?
Right.
It's literally think about what you could curl with a finger versus what you could what you could crush with your hand. Does that make
Right.
sense? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So that I think is a really big thing, and I think you may have actually psychologically created this condition for yourself by over practicing something which doesn't make any sense. Okay. And
Yeah. That sounds about right.
yeah. Now, and again, like your videos are hella impressive. Like, I mean, they were really, really good. And like I said,
Thank
this seems to only affect people who are heavy practicers. Okay. And I don't have any kind of dystonia, but I have certainly at times done things to my body while practicing guitar that made things painful or difficult or made my hands feel like shit for the rest of the day, and that's just not actually meaningful practice, right?
See,
So
the interesting thing is I can't say I've really ever done that. I don't feel like I've ever really ever had pain, and then this thing just kind of crept up on me, and it doesn't hurt. But obviously the tension, it's not a painful
yes,
tension,
it's
but it
not it's
is
not
tense.
see, but the thing is the muscles you're activating and that you're turning on are so powerful that you can't actually tire them. Okay, the muscles that I was turning on and trying to activate were small and weak and incapable of the kind of workload that I was putting on them. So they got tired and they got fatigued and they got strained, which is painful. Okay. So I think we had the opposite problem. I think I was trying to do something that small movement muscles can't do, okay, and exhausting them. And I think what you're trying to do is that you are using big muscles, big powerful muscles that you cannot tire out, but which are making it impossible for your other muscles to work.
Mm.
Okay. Now that
Yeah,
that's
so
my
they're firing in opposition to each other, and so
yeah.
they can't work
They
cooperatively.
can't work cooperatively, right? Now the other thing is the position of your thumb. Let me grab something which is it's a silly prop, but it makes a point. By the way, have you ever done any like rock climbing or anything?
No, minimal. I do a
Minimal.
lot of pull-ups and
Yeah, but
yeah.
if so, you'll be able to follow along with this. Just hang on a second there.
Okay, I'm gonna be right back too. I'm just gonna run to the
Sure.
bathroom. All right, I'm sorry about that.
No problem. So, right, so your hand is capable of two basic grips. There's a lot of like variation, but you've got two basic grips which are important. You have what's called a pinch grip, like this,
Right?
right? And you have what's called a power grip, like that. Okay?
Yeah.
And you need both. Okay? You need both, and you need both at different times in guitar playing. Okay? And I'll try to talk about the kind of strengths and weaknesses of both. Now, obviously, this pinching grip here uses the muscles which flex here, which are small and in the hand, and they get tired. Okay? But it also engages your thumb. It draws your thumb up into opposition like this, okay, in opposed to your middle finger, and it turns on this muscle here. This is called your opponents. Can you feel that in your own hand if you do it?
In the pinch grip, you say,
You
yeah,
can
I
feel
feel
you
it.
can feel you can. So if you try to hold a bar chord like on an acoustic guitar with 12s or 13s for a minute, your hand will be exhausted. Every guitar player has had that experience, right? It's just completely normal, right? But so that's your hand getting tired here. When is this grip okay? Well, basically, anytime you're doing something which doesn't require a lot of power. Okay, so if I'm writing, for example, a pen grip is basically the same as a pinch grip. And this is small, it's light, and it doesn't require any meaningful force to operate. Okay,
Hmm.
right? On the other hand, if I was doing something that required a much more secure grip, something much more safe, say for example, I was operating this and I tried to hold it like this. How do you think I'm going to get on? Is this a good idea?
No, yeah, you don't have the.
I don't have any security, right?
Yeah.
What do you do when you want to hold something powerfully? You let it sit diagonally across the palm, not straight up, diagonally. Okay. You curl your fingers, and then your thumb comes on top in a supporting fashion, and your wrist is straight. Okay. Yeah. Now you'll notice here that yes, like the trigger finger thing, you can extend your index finger here, right? But if I tried to do any extension in, say, for example, my ring finger, now my entire grip is weak and that would fall out of my hand.
Right.
Okay. So this is much more powerful. It's much more structurally secure, but it doesn't allow me any individual finger action. Okay. On the other hand, this allows me some degree of individual finger action. Okay.
Oh, I lost the audio there.
Oh, sorry. Am I back?
Sorry if you just did.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So
you're good.
this doesn't requires me some individual finger action. I can still move my fingers individually, but it's weak and it will fatigue easily. Okay. So one of the things I noticed in your more recent video is with this kind of finger independence exercise position, your thumb is drawn up in opposition to your middle finger. Okay. It's not
Okay.
sitting.
Just so I can see that.
Yeah, yeah. So before, when you were playing the Holsworth tune, your hand was completely relaxed when you put it on the guitar. Okay, it was completely relaxed. Your thumb was kind of pointed up towards your index finger, which I'll talk about in a second. But now your thumb is dropped down, your wrist has a much more severe angle, and it's bent down like that. and your thumb is drawn up and into opposition.
Hmm.
Okay? Now, why is that a problem? Well, because you don't need that force. Okay? You don't need your thumb to provide a counter pressure into the back of the neck. Okay? If you can, if you think about if you were pushing somebody away with like a stick or like a spear, at the end of that, you
Yeah.
can use the structure of your thumb as like a frame to press against. Okay? You can align that. So there's no squeeze with my thumb. I'm not pinching. I'm just aligning it into the back of the neck like a frame. And I push against the frame.
And it seems like you use almost more of the tip of your thumb than.
Do you know what? Do you know where it is? It's about there. It's about there. Do you have a hitchhiker's thumb? Can you? Yeah, you do. You'll be able to do this no problem as well. So it's not the pad of my thumb. It's not down here near here. It's up near the tip. Okay, and
Okay.
it's like a frame. It's like if I the counter pressure into the back of the neck is supplied by the fact that my bone is a physical object and it can absorb force.
Hmm.
Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
my thumb is not turned on at all here.
Oh, okay. So it's not like it's reciprocating the force from the fingers, but it's not adding its own force.
Yeah, imagine like you and your friend are you lock hands like this and you lean into each other. You're both providing counterforce, okay?
Right.
Now imagine doing the same thing with a wall, okay? So, you put your hands on the wall and you lean into it. Is the wall working to hold you up? No.
No,
It's just a wall.
not exerting any force.
No, it's exerting force. The wall is exerting force. It's just not expending energy. It's
Okay.
exerting force through structure. Okay?
Right.
So I
Right.
want you I what I would like is for my thumb, whenever available, to exert force through structure rather than through counter pressure, muscular force, muscular exertion. Okay?
Yeah,
So
structure rather than exertion. Okay.
structure rather than muscular exertion. Now, structure isn't always available, but it's available so often that you should be using it at every opportunity. Okay?
Mhm.
Another thing, say when I pinch like this and I'm pressing into the counter pressure, watch here, right? So one side of the grip here is created by my fingers curling in. What creates the counter pressure in this? It's my palm, right? You see
Right.
that? It's my palm. The reason that this grip is secure is because the fingers are curling into the palm, and the palm is a wall. It's a physical object that holds the prop, well, in this case, the knife, but it's holding the prop in place. Does that make
Right.
sense? Okay.
Yeah.
So there's no counter pressure that I'm trying to create. The counter pressure is supplied by the structure. The thumb coming over top is not the counter pressure that makes this secure. That's just an extra little detail to get that last little bit of security out of it. But the grip is plenty secure here. And I'm sure you've done a pull up with a five finger or monkey grip, right?
I'm sorry.
Like a monkey grip, like a five finger grip, like that, rather than like,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Sure.
So the grip is plenty strong without the thumb, okay? And the reason it's strong without the thumb is because you've got your palm as a backstop, okay?
Right.
Right? So let's say, for example, I'm sitting playing a D major chord on an acoustic guitar. And this, by the way, this is the Sean Lane signature model. It's like got nines and super low action. So this is not a guitar that would require this, but I play acoustic guitars as well, and my acoustic guitars have 12s or sometimes 13s. Okay,
Right.
so it's a completely different instrument with a completely different technique involved. But if I were to pinch playing, say, like an open D chord like that, okay, right, on an acoustic guitar, there would be force pulling my fingers and my thumb apart, and I would be using this pinching pressure here. Okay, if instead I was to fill the palm with the neck and curl in with the tips of the fingers like this with my thumb over top. Okay? I'm now backstopping the neck with my palm like I
Hmm.
was before. So this is my power grip applied to a guitar. Now, I have much less individual finger action, but I'm holding a chord. I don't need to be able to do fast, independent finger action. Does that make sense? Right?
Right.
So when I need power, I create power. When I need precision and individual action, that's when I try to open my hand up a little bit more and use structure to hold myself and create the counter pressure. Does that make sense?
Could you say that one more time?
So if I need power, I'll go to my power grip, like this one,
Right.
right? Now imagine acoustic guitar with 13s. If I do this, how long is it going to last?
It's, yeah, not very long.
Not very long. If I do this, how long is it going to last?
A lot longer.
A lot longer, as long as I want it to. As long as my fingers are, I've got calloused fingers and I can deal with the
Yeah, if you've
pressure
been
on,
playing
on my
for a while.
fingertips, which I can, right? But muscularly, this is going to last much, much longer,
Sure.
right? And the same thing applies when you're doing any, say, like you were saying, you use nines to tens, which is light enough that it doesn't really matter. But let's say I've played Stratocasters with 11s as well. I went back down, but I've tried it. I was
Yeah.
into David Gilmour and stuff, and people who played heavier strings, and I wanted to see what all the fuss was about. But let's say you're going for a bend, right? What
Right.
what grip is this? That's my power grip, right?
Yeah.
But I can't move my fingers fast and individually from this grip,
Sure. Yeah, the
right?
thing that I see here too is like understanding that compromise that no matter what you do at some stage, something else is traded and knowing
Yes,
when.
yes. So it's not about controlling everything or having one position that does everything. It's about understanding the compromises that my body needs to make. Okay? Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Right?
Yeah, I feel like maybe part of it has developed through trying to find that grip that's a Swiss Army knife that can
There
do
isn't
everything.
one. There isn't
Right. And
one.
like you're saying, there just
Yeah, there
isn't
isn't
one.
one. And do you find yourself trying to find a seated posture from which you can play everything or a standing posture from which you can play everything?
Yeah.
Okay, that's another problem that also doesn't work, and I'll try to explain why. Okay? So I want to just go aside here and talk about the absolute foundation of what I teach to people, okay? Which is
Sure.
something
Yeah.
I call the hand at rest, okay? And the idea is very simple. If I if my hand is completely relaxed, there is a natural shape. By the way, I'm holding my wrist in position. I'm holding my wrist straight, but my hand here, I'm not trying to activate any fingers or anything, okay? So I'm just not
Okay.
going to let my wrist flop, okay, from side to side. But my hand, I'm not squeezing, okay? If I shake out my hand down at my side and I bring it up to any position, it's going to have this naturally relaxed shape, okay? Where we notice that there is a similar degree of flexion in all fingers. This kind of natural cascade is what they call it in physiotherapy, cascade of the fingers, okay? And the degree of flexion in every finger is roughly the same, right? You'll see that my thumb is pretty close to my index finger. It's not drawn into opposition like we saw before. It's not drawn down here. And there's no big thumb bump. Can you see that?
Right. Yeah.
When my hand is relaxed, it assumes a shape something like this. Okay, now this is my hand at rest. Your hand at rest might be a little bit different. Okay, so this is my hand at rest, and we can see that it's naturally curved. You'll also notice the fingers aren't tightly squeezed together, but they're also not spread apart. It's not that or that.
Yeah.
It's like there. Okay.
This is like if you were to set your hand on the end of an armchair or something.
Yeah, if you just or the way I'll tell you how I originally came across this idea, but it's something that has a really tremendous versatility. Now, in my hands, my thumb just comes just about inside my index finger like that because my hands are quite flexible. Okay, um, but other people I have seen their thumb ends up being a bit more like here. Okay, now
Okay.
what you want to do because your fingers have the greatest capacity for individual action, not independent action, but individual action. That is, for you to use a finger with minimal influence from the other fingers. Okay? Your fingers have their greatest capacity for individual action near this position. Okay? What that means is that everything I try to do is based on aligning this resting hand position onto the guitar. Okay? So if I'm, say for example, I'm working my picking technique, right? How would I advise somebody to learn a picking technique? Well, I would say, okay, shake out your hand, bring it up somewhere close to the guitar, this resting hand position. Slip a pick between your thumb and first finger wherever it fits. Make whatever minimal variation you have to away from that position, and start playing. Okay, and my fretting hand does exactly the same thing. I find my hand at rest. I shake it out. Do not look at your hand when you do this. Okay, what I do not want you to do is this. Shake it out, looking at it, and then wonder if it's at rest or not. Because what you're going to do is you're going to be like, does this look right? I would rather think this is at rest. Like start with your eyes closed and say this feels loose, this feels relaxed, and now look at your hand and say that, oh yeah, that's what it looks like. Does that make sense?
Right.
Right? Because if you start trying to think, okay, well it's supposed to look relaxed, and a relaxed hand looks like, no, no, you're adding that conscious bias again, and you're not listening to your body, and you're not letting your haptic feedback tell you what's happening. Okay?
Right.
So same way with my fretting hand, I would find my hand at rest. So here I know my hand is completely relaxed. I haven't even looked at it. And what I would do is I would just put that on the guitar somehow. Okay? And you'll notice my wrist is straight, my thumb is in structure, my fingers are all loosely curled about the same amount, and I have my fretting posture. I'm not establishing or finding a form or anything like that. I'm not setting up on the guitar. I'm shaking out my hand and putting it on the guitar.
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
There
definitely
is
can
no
make.
conscious step between that sets me up to play. My body will find the best position, the position where it's most relaxed. If I let it, if I don't stand in its way. Okay? Now, your resting hand is an incredible thing, and it can be applied to the neck in a lot of different ways. I'll talk about that in a moment. But it depends on how the guitar is positioned relative to you. Okay? I normally play with the guitar on my right leg with my legs crossed because I have the hip dexterity to do that. Okay? It doesn't
Mhm.
bother me at all. Okay? But whatever position you like is fine with me. Okay? But I want you to understand that the approach of the resting hand onto the guitar depends massively on where the guitar is positioned relative to my body. Okay, so if I'm playing in a position like this, my resting hand comes in from below. Okay, and you can see now that I'm set up for, I can, within this posture, I can achieve things like, I mean, this is an augmented stretch,
That's an interesting one.
right?
You
But
got like a class.
my hand is not in strain there, right? Because look at my wrist.
Uh-huh. Almost perfectly straight.
Almost perfectly straight. And what's holding the counter pressure? Look at my thumb, aligned like a bone, like to absorb the force like that, right? Okay.
Right.
So I can do that stretch, no trouble at all. Okay. My hand is aligned in this position for that job. But let's imagine instead of trying to do that, instead of trying to do, a Sean Lane augmented stretch, I'm trying to play the G major chord from Little Wing. Well, look where I have to put my shoulder to accommodate this. It's terrible. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's forcing your.
It's it's forcing my hand
I was preaching to
into this
myself.
awkward kind of extension here, and it's forcing my shoulder to externally rotate and abduct.
Right.
Okay? So this is not correct guitar position. It's correct for some things.
Hmm.
Okay? It's terrible for others. It's absolutely horrible for playing Little Wing. Right? So if somebody was saying, "Hey, I want to learn, a Jimi Hendrix rhythm part," I was like, "Well, don't sit like this. This is terrible, right?" But on the other hand, let's say that I am Jimi Hendrix. Well, Jimi Hendrix played the guitar down here, right at his hips. Look at my resting hand.
Yeah.
Completely relaxed. Okay? Yeah? Completely relaxed. Okay? So there is a trade-off everywhere. Now, I like this. It's high enough for me most of the time where I can drop it down onto the other leg if I need to get a little bit lower. okay? And I can kind of hike it up a little bit if I ever need to get a little bit more height. That's what I like, okay? But realistically, the guitar is going to have to move, and you should be willing to change it based on what you're trying to play, okay?
Okay.
Okay? Do
And it
not,
sounds like from
yeah,
what you
go.
said, if you're consciously, so from what you're saying from the resting exercise, like not looking at your hand and allowing your body to find a position. So I've been playing about 19 years, and it sounds like if you consciously edit your uh, posture enough, then eventually it'll become unconscious.
Hmm. Yeah,
So I think that's kind of maybe how some of this developed. Because
yes,
I'm one of those
but
fixers. It's like, okay, well, that
yeah,
doesn't look like that's quite in line, and eventually that
yeah,
just becomes
but
automatic.
the point is that you may have created this situation for yourself by trying to do the kind of work that you have done.
Right.
Okay, and you have habituated uh, a highly inefficient muscular action and hand position, which does not apply to actual guitar playing, because nobody is playing four note per string chromatic exercises all of the time, right? And what you have done is you have trained that position, and by trying to make your movements small, and by trying to make them precise, and by trying to make sure they look just right. This feels horrible on my hands, by the way. I don't like it at all. Okay? Whereas if you let your hand relax, okay? And again, here's the thing, you cannot think relax. Okay? If you tell yourself, so imagine I started a sentence with, hey, Kylan, don't panic, but what's your
Yeah,
immediate reaction?
yeah, you're tensing up a little bit. You're
You're
expecting
immediate,
something.
you're immediately expecting something to be wrong. Okay? So if a teacher tells you relax, the student's reaction is, what am I doing wrong? Well, how do I fix it? How do I what change do I have to make? I would rather you didn't think relax. I would rather you thought reset. Okay?
Hmm.
So if at any point something is going wrong, shake out a little bit, let yourself feel the floor between your feet, set your eyes at something at eye level just to give you a comfortable posture, and then put your hand on the guitar. Don't think setup. Does that make sense?
Did you say setup?
Don't think that you're setting up onto the guitar, that you're trying to find a position. There is none of that. Okay? If I'm going to play a guitar, put this here, right? So my you hear the guitar?
Yeah.
Right. If I'm thinking, okay, I need to set up my hand and so it's just the right form, it's already tight. Okay, but if I shake, it's fast, easy, effortless. Okay,
That
I'm
looks
just
super
letting
relaxed.
easy. I know it's going to work. And why is it going to work, right? Well, because I let my resting hand find where it wants to be on the guitar. Okay,
Hmm.
okay, and
So
here's
when we
the
try to edit that position, we automatically,
you're introducing tensions. Yeah,
right, right,
and here's
or
the
engage
thing.
some muscle that doesn't need to be.
Exactly, you're engaging a muscle which doesn't need to be activated and slows you down. Okay, or makes it difficult to control a different muscular group. Okay,
Right.
now here's the thing, if I'm not looking at my hand, how do I learn positions? And the answer is my fingers will tell me everything I need to know. Okay, your fingers are constantly providing you with sensory information. So like right now, I'm looking you dead in the eyes. I'm not looking at my hands. Okay, but I can feel that I'm on the G string. Okay, that all of my fingers are muting the higher strings, that the lower string, the D string, is muted by the tips of my fingers, and that I don't have enough fretting pressure right at this moment to fret with the pinky finger. But now I do. Okay? So I have all of this navigated through feel. I have trusted my haptic experience to tell me where the guitar is and what it needs to tell me. All right? I'm not trying to micromanage everything. I'm not trying to control everything. If I do that, I'll start going down this path of, compounding tensions and things like that. The guitar will
Right.
tell me where everything is. Okay. Another thing I tell students an awful lot is I never look at my picking hand. Okay, even when I'm practicing picking technique. So one of the things that one of the early exercises I give people is right. I never looked at my hand. I was looking you dead in the eye the whole way through, but I know where the strings are. Why do I know where the strings are? Well, because I have contact with the guitar.
Right.
And my sense of touch and my sense of movement is enough to tell me everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
When you're playing, is your visual attention usually on your hands? Like,
Yeah, I think a lot of times it is on the left hand.
right. So what that would suggest to me is that you are trying to make the hand do something rather than letting it do something. Does that
Yeah.
make sense? So
Yeah.
it's like I am not trying to relax. I am letting myself be relaxed. Does that make sense? It's a
Right.
completely different mindset. You cannot try to relax. Okay? And that's why you can't solve this problem by trying. The only thing you can do is reset. Okay? And really focus on the haptic feedback. What do I feel right now in my hands? Right now I can tell I don't have my pinky on the D string, so this will ring out. But now I do. I can feel that without ever putting my hand onto the guitar. Without ever looking at my hands and saying, "Oh, do I have the right damping technique?" I can tell I have the right damping technique when I have it. I can feel it. Does that make
So would
sense?
it be, yeah, I mean, would it be beneficial to notice so you're not looking at your hands or whatever, but you notice when there's tension? Because in my case, there's just gonna be, this is gonna take time to kind of work this
Absolutely, no,
off.
absolutely. If this works for you at all, because and again, if it is neurological, I can't say that. But if it's a habitual thing, like I have helped train people out of these habits. You fix habits through interruption. Okay, so for example, I used to bite my fingernails when I was a child. Okay, and then I got braces when I was a teenager, and I just couldn't do it anymore. So every time, because the braces were in the way of getting an angle to bite the nail, right? So
Mm,
every time I went to bite my fingernail, nothing happened. So the action of biting my nails was interrupted,
right.
right? Or like the thing that really fucked up my hands when I was younger was typing technique, bad typing technique. I used to sit and like I was doing my thesis, and my shoulders were collapsed like this, and my hands were like that when I was typing. So my
Ooh,
wrist was extended, and it was like this. But I didn't notice because it
really?
didn't
With
feel.
the wrist up like that?
Yeah, I didn't notice at the time while I was doing it. It didn't feel difficult in the moment.
Right.
But you do that for a month, you do it for 6 months, you do it for a year, and suddenly you've got all sorts of problems. Okay? So what I had to teach myself to do was just shake out, get onto the keyboard a little bit differently, and reset my position. And every time I go to reach for the mouse or I reach for the keyboard, I still kind of do it almost subconsciously, is that I shake out my hand before I put it onto the computer. Okay? And
Okay.
the same principle applies with retraining habits on the guitar. Is give yourself that point of interruption, but don't think relax. Think reset. Okay? Think reset, right? And another thing is, again, I mean, you're a very high level player. You've achieved an awful lot of things that are very technically impressive. And I'm going to imagine you hate mistakes. Is that right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, right. The reality is that, like, I understand, like, I get it when it comes to like recording, like a part on, like, when you're tracking, or if you're trying to get a video or something like that. I get it. I completely do, right? But the
Mm,
reality is that you are going to make mistakes. Everybody has a miss rate, whatever it is. If you think about like Steph Curry, like he might be 95% from a free throw line, but he's not 100%. Everybody misses, right?
right,
Right.
right.
And I've analyzed a lot of footage of very fast guitar playing, and there are misses, there are whiffed notes everywhere. Everybody does it. Sean Lane, Guthrie Govan, Anton Oparin, uh, Alan Holsworth, everybody misses. Okay. But the thing is, they don't stop, they recover. Okay? So in the moment, you may not notice it at all if it's fast enough. Okay? So one thing that I found is that the way I had previously been practicing, have you done a lot of metronome work?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a teacher as well, so
Yeah.
I've been teaching for 7 years and
When
lots of
when
that stuff.
when I was working with a metronome, say I was doing like
All over again. Yeah.
da 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 da. Okay, you go up 5 BPM higher, and this happens. Can you hear that I'm missing the first note on that string?
Uh,
Right? So I've missed the
yeah.
note, right? But here's the thing. That's a bad rep. That's okay. That's a miss. As long as I maintain my time feel, okay, and I don't lose the groove, I can recover, okay? And if I'm performing or if I'm playing in front of somebody, I just keep in mind now when I'm practicing, I don't worry about a miss. I worry about continuing in bad time or losing my time feel. If I lose that, I stop and I start again. But if I'm practicing or I'm teaching somebody to do something, I don't care about a missed rep. But I care because everybody has a miss rate. You can improve your miss rate. Okay? You can get that down, but it's never going to go away. And obsessing about it and training yourself to stop is a negative thing. What I would say is like if I'm practicing, say something like if I miss, but I can keep the feeling of time, I don't care about a bad stroke. I'm just going to keep plowing through the exercise and recovering. And then I'm training my recovery.
Yeah, this is funny because I always tell my students to learn how to make mistakes in time, not to
Yes,
start over.
that is it. So what now? What this has done for me is I have learned to not obsess over a mistake. Okay, because my recovery is good. Okay, and also it's made me realize that there are no consequences for mistakes and that everybody does it, and I'm human just like everybody else. Okay,
Right, right.
right? And that to me was huge because that meant I wasn't obsessing about micromanaging everything in my playing. Okay. And that I think is a really huge. I would not want a student of mine to sit with a metronome and anytime they make a bad contact with a string to stop and restart because now that's going to create this anxiety about that note or that situation. You think, oh, man, like I never make this shot. I never hit this one, you know?
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh man, this is the lick that always goes
Interruption
wrong.
too.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right? So like I've certainly done things before where like I'm playing a solo along in time with the record or whatever. And you know that lick that one lick comes up and you're like, oh no, like this is where it's all gonna go to hell. Right?
Hmm.
But now I don't have that. I think if it goes wrong, it goes wrong. You know, I missed. Fair enough. Okay, everybody misses. But if it works, and it'll be great. Okay. And sometimes, you know, I have seen every great player miss. Everybody. Everybody. There is nobody who hasn't missed. Everybody has missed. But I think it's just a case of you have to convince yourself that you can do it, and that if you, it's like, you know, like there's a great quote from Michael Jordan where he says like, you know, I've missed more shots in the NBA than most players have ever taken.
Right.
Right? And the point is, you don't get remembered for your misses, you get remembered for your makes, right? So I kind of had to remind myself that, you know, actually going for it and when it works, that's a success, and I'll try to get that success rate higher, but I can't be discouraged by a failure. You know,
Right.
all right? And it doesn't mean that I'm somehow inferior or somehow lesser than another person because they all have a miss rate too.
Sure. So what you were just saying about that one lick where everything goes to shit, what would be your approach for going over it? So
So,
would you isolate that lick? How would you
so
do that without getting neurotic about it, you know?
so my usual thing is that I say I have some lick that I think is hard or you know that I'm working on. what I'll do is I'll try to break it down into um, something which I think is like an easier version of the lick, but which maintains the same coordination for the picking and fretting hand. So say for example, there's like something which has like
I
here's a
swear
great.
for me, Cliffs of
Sorry,
Dover was. I
what
said
is
I would swear for me that like Cliffs of Dover, that intro lick has contributed in some way to this dystonia because that was
yeah
something that I had to play as fast and I could never do it and I obsessed over it. The first lick of it.
the
Yeah,
that one.
yeah,
Uh,
like all that stuff.
yeah.
I just obsess over it.
So yeah, I mean, like that was definitely something that I worked at a lot as a teenager is that particular song. But I think a really great example of kind of like building up to something and giving yourself a foundation that is transferable is like, you know, this like that Paul Gilbert lick. He's played it
I've
in
not
pretty
heard
much
that.
every. Sorry,
Interesting. I said I've not heard that one. That's interesting.
he's played that in like a million different variations. Okay, but that same coordination, he's extended that out to this pattern, which is string skipping and 3 notes per string. But it's the same pattern for the both for the right and the left hand. Right? That's exactly the same pattern of fingers and pattern of picking as it's the same. It's the same lick,
Right, right.
right? So what and I in recent years I've really gone to kind of like town on this is like just learning a bunch of physical coordinations or rudiments. If I see something appearing frequently, or if I'm trying to create my own vocabulary, as I create a rudiment. So something like a drummer would practice on a practice pad. Okay,
Hmm.
and I deliberately try to remove harmonic or musical content. All I want is rhythm and movement in time. Okay, so for example, here's one that I've been working on for a while. It's kind of a Sean Lane type thing. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. It's done with a lot of hammer-ons, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then a 5, like that. 4, 6, 5. And when I practice that and I develop the coordination, all I'm doing is playing it in a symmetric position, right?
Hmm.
And then I can take that and say C major. Same lick. Feels exactly the
Right.
same, right? Or I can take that pattern and I skip strings with it. Same pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right?
Yeah.
And you can do that with, you can take the same thing. Let's see. Might get this wrong, but let's try 3 note per string pentatonics with a skip. And that's the
Mm.
same pattern for my picking hand and my fretting hand. Does that make sense?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So this rudiment that has become vocabulary. It's become an actual musical phrase. Does that make sense? But it starts
Right.
as an abstract, simplified coordination, like a kernel of meaningful information that I can transfer from. Okay?
What
So I
did you
don't
have
let,
to
sorry?
did you have to change your right hand at all for any of that?
No, 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 it's the same. So, so my pattern there is up, up, and then I use a middle finger pick note. So up, middle, down, up, middle, and then down, up.
But when you did string skipping, it
Nope,
doesn't change.
nope, because the same pattern will work across strings. Up, middle to skip the string,
Well, I
down,
guess just the
down.
string that you had to engage in your hybrid picking was the only thing that was different.
Yes, yes.
But it's just too small of a difference, really, to
It's too
have.
small of a difference to ruin everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I come across something difficult, I don't think, oh, this is hard. Now I need to obsess about this. I'm going to give myself a bridge, a series of small coordinations that get me there. Does that make
Hmm.
sense? So
Yes.
if there's something where a position shift throws me off, just do it without the position shift. If there's something where a stretch throws me off, just do it without the stretch. If there's something where a string skip throws me off, just do it without the string skip. And don't worry about it being atonal noise. That's okay. You're not training music here. You're training a coordination that will then transfer. The same way that a drummer would practice on a pad, and then take it across different drums and actually create music out of it, right? But the physical coordination is the start.
Yeah. Yeah. Different pitch.
Yeah? Does that make sense?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's a series of
Yeah.
progression. And because I know that I can do this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm not afraid of the other ones.
Well, what if you didn't need your ring finger there at all? What if you had a pattern where you needed your ring? Would that mess with you at all?
Well, that would be a different pattern, and I would have to train that rudiment,
Okay.
right? But I would do that. I
So
would
you were
just
able to do the C major scale with no need of the ring?
no need the ring finger at all. So the C major scale was
Oh, because it works out in that position, it works out to just be those two shapes. Okay.
yeah.
Interesting.
And another thing, like this is just it's a thing Holsworth does. It's a thing Sean Lane does when improvising is not give a fuck about the unison.
About the what?
The unison note.
Oh yeah.
Or if you want to avoid it, chromatic passing tone, okay, or string skip, okay.
I always thought it sounded cool.
I think it sounds. I like the unison. I think it
Yeah, I
breaks
like.
up the pattern. But the point I'm making there is that I build bridges. Does that make sense? I don't take the Holsworth lick or the Sean Lane lick and say I learn it like this.
Mhm.
Where it's the most extreme version of a physical coordination. Where I I I I figure out the fretting hand sequence. I figure out the picking sequence that I'm going to use, and then I train that in simplified form so that I
It's
just
much
have
smaller than you're thinking.
yeah in I eliminate string skips. I use small reaches, but the point is this is training my fingers to do all of this kind of stuff. So that there, like it feels different. I won't lie, but it doesn't feel radically different.
What's that?
That's
What
the
change?
same pattern, but done on a 3 note per string E minor pentatonic with string skips,
Ah, yeah.
right? Right? And that's like that whole sequence is 15 notes, right?
Hmm.
And if you think like, hey, that's 15 notes that goes by like this, and it's impossible to play because it's 3 note per string pentatonics with string skips. You're gonna give yourself anxiety even thinking about it.
Yeah, you're already twisted into a
You're already
pretzel.
twisted. You're like there's no way this can be possible. But if you say,
Yeah.
okay, well, it's the same as that, and I can build up to it, then it's not so bad,
Right, right.
right? So that really helps me uh get from like terrifying thing, which is completely unconquerable, to uh thing which is kind of maybe approachable, to thing which is easy. And
Right.
like for me, particularly in the 3 note per string major scale shape, that's easy. Doesn't feel difficult or scary at all.
Hmm.
But if you said to somebody, "Hey, this is this 3 note per string, string skipping hybrid picking lick," like, oh my, oh no, that sounds scary, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, but I don't let myself get that anxiety about things.
Yeah, it's that framing. I
That
forgot what you
that
said.
that framing is gone for me.
Don't panic, but yeah.
Don't panic. But here's the 3 note per string pentatonic string skipping lick. You know, it's
Exactly.
not that. It's don't panic. Here's the simple coordination that you can do easily. You know,
Right.
here's your
Right.
rudiment. Now you can apply it. That takes that don't panic but away, right?
Hmm.
And it's not about finger independence exercises. I didn't get here by doing like or something like like I didn't do any of that crap. Okay, does that make sense?
Right.
Right? Yeah, like because this doesn't actually apply to real playing. Like that kind of stuff. It's not real. Your hands don't do that while you actually.
One very specific lick for 2 seconds.
Yes, but then you could
Yeah.
just train that as a rudiment or train that lick or whatever it is,
Right.
right? So I don't obsess about finger independence exercises. I don't obsess about economy of motion. Why are my movements small? And yes, my movements are small, but why are they small? They're small because my hand at rest is pretty much aligned perfectly on the guitar, where I can feel the strings underneath my fingertips, right?
Yeah.
Right? I'm not thinking small fretting motion. I just know that they're going to be small because I'm already touching the strings.
Yeah. And I don't know, just thinking small fretting motion, then you're gonna edit your movements and
Exactly.
nothing's small enough, you
Yeah.
know. I think that's kind of it too, because I always you know Rick Graham.
Yep.
He talks a lot about economy of motion, and I always think about it with the picking hand. And when you think about it, like you really can't you could get it infinitely small and neurotically obsess over that. And I think that's some of what I've done to kind of
Mm.
work myself into this corner here of tension.
But the other
'Cause you
thing
can
is,
always get
yeah,
small.
movements don't fail because they're large. Okay, movements fail because they get too small to be effective, or because they're too weak to be effective. Okay,
Hmm.
so if you think about your picking movement, right? Say you're picking, right? So as I get faster, it's going to get smaller anyway. That's just physics. Okay,
Right. Right.
right? So what's going to happen as I get smaller? Well, either I won't have the necessary force to push from one side of the string to the other, right? I won't have the
Right.
force to break through, or the movement will actually be so small. So like that would be like a rebound where I hit the string and bounce back. I don't have the force to actually carry myself through it. Or the other possibility is that I end up with something which is too small, and as I try to move, I'm really just rubbing the tip of the pick on the string like that.
Right. Right. You're not even traversing the
I'm not
distance of
even
the.
traversing the distance of the string, right? So if I start with something which is small, what's the most likely outcome? Well, the most likely outcome is that it's going to be too small by the time I try to speed up. Okay? And if I start with something which is weak, the most likely outcome is that it's going to be too weak. Right? Where if I
Well, and
start,
the other thing, if you
sorry?
started with a small, the other thing would be if you started with a small motion, it's going to get larger anyways because of your inefficiency, because you have to work down to that smaller movement. So you're just,
Mhm.
it's just kind of
Yeah.
silly. Yeah.
Whereas if I start big and powerful and effortless, look how large that is. Can you hear the accent?
Yeah.
Like I'm nearly like I'm trying to break the string. But my hand moves plenty fast because my hand is able to generate the power to get through the string and the range of motion to get through the string. And it's easy because I'm engaging big, powerful muscles to do it.
Right.
I'm not doing something like this is small,
Yeah, trying to move with your
but I've
like
no
doing one.
power, I've no ability to play dynamically, and the movement is already getting too small. It's not fast, right?
Right.
So, like, have you ever thought about why all of the fastest players are elbow pickers,
It does kind of seem that way, huh?
right? Why are
I
they?
was taught like, wrist picking, not to use your
Yeah,
elbow.
but why is everybody who's like faster, like at the fastest level, like Jason Richardson and Rusty Cooley, and after a certain level, everybody goes elbow. Why is that?
You're right.
Well, that's because the elbow is big and powerful. Okay, it always has power. Okay, much more than the wrist, and the arc that's traversed by the elbow because of the leverage of the length of the forearm. A small angle at my elbow creates a big distance at the strings, right?
Hmm.
If I pick from the fingers, right, well, then a small angle at my fingers creates nothing. And I don't have the power to cut through the string in both directions. Okay?
Right. And I've noticed that at one point I was just thinking about how I could never like tremolo pick all that quick.
Yeah.
And the only way that I ended up getting it really quick was to go to the elbow, which I hate using because, well, I wasn't thinking like this, but for that situation, like situational playing, that's perfect. But
Yeah.
I'm not really sure it's that useful in anywhere else
Sure.
unless
And
you.
like I train people how to develop picking technique that's actually so I have 5 criteria for picking technique. The first one is that you have a low background of muscular tension, um, and that you have an efficient muscular action. Okay? So I wouldn't like to see anybody trying to do something like this before they ever got started on the guitar, right?
Yeah,
Right,
yeah, yeah.
because that's extremely tight looking. Okay, so efficient action, like powerful, efficient muscles working from a low background tension. That's step number one. Second one for me is a strong connection to your internal time. Okay, if you can't do
Mhm.
a picking movement in time, I don't care about it. Okay, it's not musical. Okay, you have to be able
Right.
to play in time. Okay, third one is a high dynamic range. Okay, so I don't want I want where you can make like machine gun like accents coming out of the guitar,
Yeah, it
right?
really does sound like some drumline kind of stuff.
That
It's
that yeah
dynamic.
yeah it's dynamic, right? So I have power, I have a low background tension, I have efficient muscular action, I have high dynamic range and a connection to my time field. Then the Troy stuff, right? I need string tracking, that is the ability to move across all 6 strings, and I
Mhm.
need right one more thing, I need one escape direction so that I can get out of the strings and actually play lines, right?
Right.
So what I teach students, I have these like they are literally drum rudiments basically, which is to kind of to get them doing those kinds of things, right? And you can hear how my accents are, right? They're coming through
Yeah,
clearly, I hope, right? Yeah. And
that's right.
the reality is that doesn't feel difficult or strenuous at those kinds of speeds. Okay? Like I can pick at John Petrucci speeds without ever getting tired. I could do it all day, right? And the reason is because I have big, powerful muscles driving my actions, right? Where
Mhm.
and now can I go faster? Yes, but I can do that for a short period of time. Does that make sense? So like
Yeah.
I can do a lick at you know 250 beats per minute. I can do a lick, or play for 2 or 3 seconds. I can't maintain that indefinitely because that's when the fatigue sets in, where I get past the threshold. Yeah.
Hmm.
So
Right.
when I'm teaching picking technique, it's the same kind of thing. And I think the obsession with small is really, really unhelpful. I think it's really, really unhelpful, and I think it doesn't actually. Have you ever noticed that when drummers practice, they get better, but when guitarists practice, we get frustrated,
Yeah.
right? So if you think about how drummers train, drummers start big, powerful in time. They do not try to make the smallest strokes that they can on their practice pad or their snare head first. They train their rudiments with big, powerful movements. They create it in their whole body, you know. And
Mm.
I think this is just I think it's the right way to go about things. I think and my rate of learning and improvement has gone up massively since I changed my outlook on this stuff. And like I know it doesn't seem it now, but there was a point 8 years ago where I thought I might never play guitar again.
Yeah.
Right?
How long have you
But
been playing?
22 years,
Wow. Okay.
about the same time as you. So, what age are you, by the way?
I'm 30. Well, I'll be 33 in April. So pretty young.
I'm 33 now, so I'll be 34 later this month. So we're very similar ages. And so
Okay.
that means we were probably brought up with all of the same instructional material, looking up to the same
Yeah.
people and all that kind of stuff. But like I don't like being a shit stirrer, but I think most of what people say is wrong.
Sure. I mean, everything that you're saying is making total sense. And the
Yeah.
same thing with that post that I found there. It was just like, yeah, I don't think this is neurological because the statements you're following up with make too much sense. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
all of this stuff.
And look, I recently had another student. Look, I can't show you video of other students. That would be completely a violation of their privacy.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm not going to do that. But I had another student recently, and I'll try to show. I just want to let my cat in here. I had another student recently. He was complaining about all sorts of difficulties with his fretting hand. And his fretting posture, he had the same kind of activation at these knuckles here as you, and this kind of situation. But he also had his wrist cocked at this kind of a funny angle. Okay, so it looked like this. Now he's only been playing 3 years, and he's never felt efficient fretting before. He's not like you, where you actually had good technique at one point, and you
Right.
trained yourself out of it. Okay, he's never had it. Okay, but he was starting to wonder if he had some kind of motor learning disability. And I said to him, "You're probably just catastrophizing the situation. You're probably just, you try, it doesn't work. You try harder, it doesn't work. So you start trying to rationalize and say, there is something wrong with me."
Yeah.
Yeah. Where the reality is he's just not using his muscles correctly. Yeah.
Right. And I
And
mean,
and
there is a name for this condition, like, but it's kind of the same thing. Like in a sense, focal dystonia is catastrophizing something. It's just there's a word for this particular kind of
yes,
catastrophizing.
yeah. And look, I'm not a neurologist. Okay. I'm not a, but I have absolutely helped people train out bad tension, like excess tension. And I have absolutely myself broken postural I've retrained my posture. I've retrained my typing technique. I've retrained a large part of my guitar technique in the last 6 years. Okay, I was already a capable player. I was playing Paul Gilbert tunes when I was 16, right?
Mm.
Like I mean, I was capable, you know. But I have gone from fast to whoopity bloop Sean Lane nonsense fast. I have gone from, having a picking technique which worked for some things and didn't work for others to having been able to train every picking movement that I could ever want. You know, I have no technical hang-ups about the guitar anymore. None. Like literally, I don't feel like there's anything I can't accomplish because I think I know how to train everything now. And
Mm.
on one level, like that might sound incredibly arrogant. I mean, you see me play a little bit, you can see that,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not a scrub. Um, but you know, I don't feel like there's anything that wouldn't be approachable for me if I go about it the right way and I learn how
Right.
to,
Yeah.
right?
I
And I
felt that
and
way really or really close to there, but you're like that next step because I can see that you've like consciously and not just like healthily, not neurotically optimized your technique, right?
yes, yes, but I want to say that it came after. things that were potentially going to stop me playing. My typing technique was terrible. You know, I
Did that bleed
what?
into
Yes, it
playing?
did. It did. So I had so much tension developing in my forearms, which that I got tendonitis in both wrists for 2 years, and I could barely play the guitar comfortably at all. Like it was, and I felt like I was getting slower, and I was wondering if it was just age. You
Yeah.
know, like does this just happen with age? Am I just slowing down or whatever? No, it was all of the muscles in my forearm were habitually tight from typing like that,
Right.
right? And I went to the physiotherapist and the movement specialist and everybody. I did Alexander technique and all of that stuff, and I brought like they made me sit and watch television. They made me play guitar. They made me work at a keyboard, and they all told me like it's funny when you sit at a keyboard you're slumped like this and you're like that, but when you play guitar you're here. And I realized that I was very fortunate. I had a very good teacher, and he just did not let me sit with bad posture while playing guitar. Like he would say, "No, sit up," you
Hmm.
know. So I developed that habit of sitting well while playing guitar. But I also most definitely was doing things that I have completely abandoned because I feel that on one level, they were solving problems that I was making for myself, like we talked about earlier,
Right.
but on another level, I don't feel they're actually healthy for my hands. So one of the things that I before I knew about the anatomy of the forearm, for example, I was trying to do these every combination of hammer-ons from like descending hammers and stuff like that, um, like for the holes where the kind of like that. That's not those aren't pull-ups, those are hammers, right? So one of the things I came up with like all of these like permutation ideas like um, that's every combination of hammer-on transition.
Hmm.
But the reality is that's a lot of work for your forearm, like because your muscles are not independent, as we talked about, right? So to make your hand do something like that is quite strenuous. But also, I'm never actually going to play it because it's an exercise and not something that has transferable musical value.
Right.
Does that make sense? So
Right.
what I would rather do is create a rudiment, by which I mean something that I can generalize to have musical application. A physical coordination, a kernel of coordination that applies everywhere. So for example, let's say you're talking about like the pentatonic descent, right? Like the Eric Johnson thing, right?
Mhm.
So that's sixes, right? So how would I practice sixes? I'll take any two note group, just two adjacent frets with these two fingers, 1 and 4, and just go like that, right?
Oh, you mean 1 and 3 there?
1 and 3, just 1 and 3. That's right, the whole way through, right? And then I'll worry about fitting it to a shape after I've got the coordination,
Hmm.
right? And once I have the picking hand rudiment, it applies to all minor pentatonic shapes. So it feels exactly the same as feels the same. Feels the same. Doesn't bother me, right? But here's the thing. That 2 note per string rudiment, we tend to think as guitar players that 2 notes per string means pentatonic and 3 note per string means major scale, right?
Hmm.
Right? But you can take take a Lydian scale, and if you leave out the second and the sixth, you get so you can play your rudiments in uh, like 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 that's for my right hand feels exactly like I'm playing an Eric Johnson lick, but I've created more vocabulary just by changing what my left hand does.
Right.
Or like we were talking about earlier, where I have a 3 note per string rudiment, like that one, right? And I'm going to take that and apply it, well, first to every 3 note per string shape, right? But then I'll apply it to like 3 note per string pentatonics, or 3 note per string arpeggios, or 3 note per string anything. And I'll see what happens. And some things
Right.
will work and some things won't, and that's fine. But I'm going to generate a huge amount of vocabulary along the way, which was all easy and free because I worked this out.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Or like, let's say, for example, here's another rudiment. This one's like, it's so that's up, up, middle, down, 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 like that. And then playing it in a scale is not hard, right?
Right.
Or here's one in 7. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's that. You could play that one in like I haven't played that one before. So that's playing it in 3 note per string pentatonic shapes,
Hmm.
right? But it's still just the same rudiment.
Where do you get the fourth note? Is it just
Sorry?
the fourth note would just be like an approach note in there? If since they're three note, because you've got a group of seven,
Yeah.
right? Three and four.
So
So many.
the way, so one thing that happens with a lot of like Sean Lane or Eric Johnson phrasing is things are in odd note groups. Like Eric uses fives an awful lot, and Sean
Yeah.
uses sevens, but they're playing in sixteenths, or they're playing in 16th note triplets. So they're playing at a fairly even subdivision. And what this does is it displaces the rhythm and makes you expect a different note harmonically. Okay?
Hmm.
So
Right. Right.
the big problem with playing things that are even in time, like straight fours, is that if you play that over your one chord, you are eventually going to play the fourth over this, and
Right.
your ear will expect it, and you'll go, "Oh, that was a pretty shit note,"
Hmm.
right? Whereas if you have something which is rhythmically displaced, it doesn't ever sound like you're forcing a bad note onto a strong beat. It just sounds floaty and bubbly and weird and wonderful.
Right. Right.
So when you work in patterns that are not, which are not even meter, you end up taking away the value of any individual note, the harmonic value of any individual note. But that can work in your favor because it removes uh, the bad notes that make you sound, you know, like you're making a bad harmonic choice. Does that make sense?
You're right.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So like
Absolutely.
one for example, like here's another one. This is fours and fives. See that one? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that pattern's in 9. Okay, and 9 is not something which will repeat
How do
evenly.
you get the five?
Sorry.
Well, could you do that one more time?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, there's two. Okay, two
2,
strings.
3,
Yeah.
4, 5.
Gotcha. Yeah. I was gonna say that'd have to be on two strings.
Yeah, it is on 2 strings, but so it's a 4 followed by a 5, right? But the root and that little rudiment, it exists in this little 6 note cell, and I can do it ascending, descending, whatever I like. It's the same pattern, right?
So could I ask you real quick just how you came to learn so much about anatomy and your field and everything? Because you said you're a university lecturer,
So
so
I'm not that. That's not what I do. I'm a mathematician. Okay, so I teach mathematics. Okay,
oh,
I got into learning about anatomy because I hurt my hands and I wanted to understand what was wrong. Okay,
wow, okay.
so
Where did you
sorry,
where did you start with learning about anatomy at the
I
time?
went into the university library and I got some books,
Okay.
which I am completely in my rights to do. That my staff library card does that for me, and whenever I had questions, I went on to Stack Exchange or I found somebody who I know who's an anatomist, and I ask them a question, and they will tell you answers. People are fairly nice. Um, and by the way, there's all sorts of videos on cadaver dissection. Anything that you would learn in an undergraduate anatomy degree is online. Everything,
Right.
right? So you can watch like people dissect the cadavers and show you the connections between the tendons and things like that. It's not hard to find those videos. All right.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
yeah, and there's so like it really was just like a side project, a passion project, because first off I wanted to understand what I was doing so that I didn't hurt myself anymore. And after that I realized that actually I think this goes a lot further than I realized, and I can um, then I got into reading a little bit about learning and like movement learning. So I a couple of years. So when I was about, I'm 34 next month. I used to work abroad. I used to work in China at a university there, and I got kind of depressed and well, not kind of depressed. I was pretty much struggling with depression at the time. Living in a small studio apartment in Beijing by myself, it was not very pleasant. And
Hmm.
I went to. I've always been kind of naturally slim. So I'm 6 feet tall, but for most of my life I was about 140 pounds.
Hmm.
So quite lanky. And I got up to 83 kilos, which is about, I think, about 180 pounds. So I gained
Wow.
40 pounds of weight. And then I decided I needed to replace some of my sitting down hobbies with moving around hobbies. And that was, so I decided I wanted to get fit. And one of the things I got interested in was I started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I kept it up. I've been a purple belt for like 2 years now, so I'm probably close to brown. But that was the first time that I had an experience of learning a physical skill as an adult. And I got interested in learning and how learning works and optimal training routines and things like that and all of that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of carryover, like of just learning any skill, anything. You
Right.
can you can learn anything, it's and I had kind of learned guitar as a teenager, kind of. I solved problems, but I was still kind of intuitive the way young people are, like you tool about with it and then you get an answer. You tool about with it and you get that kind of way. Whereas
Hmm.
like jujitsu for me from the very beginning was kind of intellectualized. I didn't just like figure it out by spending time on the mats the way a small child would, right? Or
Right.
the way somebody who grows up in a wrestling family or something like that, or a basketball family just kind of figures out the sport because they're doing it all of the time. They learn the
Hmm.
footwork intuitively. I had to learn the steps and the how and the why of everything. And then a lot of it was like, oh, this feels like the same idea, the same principle would apply over here, or it feels like that principle would be similar. And one of the things that you know, that gets talked about an awful lot in jiu-jitsu is efficiency of technique, technical efficiency, being able to control somebody through technique rather than just sheer force and strength, right? But
Right.
even if you have force multipliers, like efficient technique, you'll still have um, it still requires effort. You still have to try. You're still in a fight, you know. And one
Hmm.
of the major problems I had with jujitsu was that I was very hesitant. I didn't want to succeed based on hulking out and winning through physicality,
Right.
Whereas, so, and one of my coaches just said, look, you have to find some way that you're willing to try harder. that you're actually willing to engage and push and go. And then I kind of realized on guitar that I had kind of had the same thing. I had become in love with technical perfection. And I wasn't letting myself ever try very hard. But here's the thing, when you try hard and fail, that tells you your method is bad, right? That's good feedback. That's meaningful feedback. So when you actually are willing to push and you still fail, that's a fantastic indicator that you're doing something wrong, right? On the other hand, you can try uh, very minimally, and if you still succeed, that's an excellent indicator that you're doing really well, that your technique is perfect. And you need both. You need both extremes in your testing. You need to fail and you need to succeed. You need to fail with maximum effort and succeed with minimum effort. You need both. Does
Mhm.
that make sense? You need, it's like, yeah, you need both. And I only ever let myself succeed with minimal effort. I never let myself fail with maximum effort. And that was a problem.
Mhm.
So in guitar I was very much the same. I was never willing to just gear up and go a little bit more and actually fail. And with a lot of I don't know if you've seen Troy's videos on starting with speed, or there's a video with Sean Lane where he talks about like, how people should develop speed and things like that. And he's saying, look, I look really, I just,
Sloppy,
yeah,
fix
I
it.
just go for it. It'll be sloppy, it'll be rough, but it will get better. And he's right. It will be sloppy and it will be rough and you will make mistakes. But so what? Mistakes, everybody has a miss rate, and you're just going to work on your miss rate and you're going to work on your recovery. And then what harm? Does that make sense?
Well, and that being sloppy too is allowing your muscles to kind of figure things out. So when
Yes.
you're
Yeah. Yeah.
controlling it, you're doing, you're liable to get into a situation where I'm at, where you don't
Yeah.
allow your muscles to kind of think for themselves, so to speak, and
Yeah.
then
And that's what I was doing. I was definitely going down the path that kind of you had done, where I had tried to over intellectualize everything and never actually just floor it and see what happens. Does the engine explode or do I end up at the finish line? You know? And I started letting myself just floor it. Like, I am much faster than I was Paul Gilbert fast as a teenager, but I hit a plateau. I never got faster than that, and I'm way faster than that now. So it can't be age, it can't be genetics. It's a change in
so
outlook. Sorry.
how haywire does it go when you try to do something by cutting loose? I mean, could you demonstrate that real quick? Like
So
just cutting loose on something that'd be complete
yeah, I don't
slop.
know. I don't know. Let's see here.
I'm just curious to see.
So um, it'll probably fail, right? So let's see.
Well, we kind of want it to, but I'm just curious.
Let's try that one. It's gonna fail. Yeah, it's failing. Yeah. So I know I have to work some time in that speed zone. So that speed is fine. That's a little bit too quick. That's about as fast as I can hold the click in my head. Where I can connect it to my time field.
Right.
So what I need to do there is get that accent more connected to my sense of time and be able to feel that click faster. Yeah. Um, and another thing I needed was when you play guitar unplugged. Do you play guitar unplugged often?
Yeah, yeah.
When you play guitar unplugged, if you do a hammer on from nowhere, if you play any note, actually, when you're playing fast enough, you're not only going to get the note that you're playing, this one, you're going to get a note over here behind the
Mm,
fret.
right,
And when you play unplugged, that note is nearly as loud or as loud as the note you're actually wanting to hear.
right.
So, but the thing is, the amplifier won't hear it because this does not make sound. This makes signal.
Mm.
right? And the note behind the fret is not in the signal, right?
Right.
So I needed to create a feedback loop which was reliable and allowed me to make an accurate judgment. So now when I'm practicing, I always have this thing, right? And like I'll
Mm.
play clean and I'll play quiet or whatever, but you know, like I mean like clean tone and I'll play quiet or whatever, but it's almost always on. The only time it's not is if I'm practicing very late at night and you know there's somebody in the house and I don't want to wake them up, in which case I have this, right? This is not for me to play clean because I can play clean without it. This is for making me not hear the note behind my finger. That's all.
Oh,
That's all. Because if I can't hear the note that I want to hear and I can only hear the notes behind my finger and the contact of, you know, metal on metal and the kind of clang that that makes, you know, the kind of the noise of the fret being hit, not the noise of the, you know, the note on the string,
right.
right? If I hear all of that extra noise, which does not come through the amplifier, the frets are not amplified and the rest of the string is not amplified, then I can't tell that I'm actually doing it. And I'll hold myself back. I will deliberately not go where I can go because I think I'm going sloppy.
Well, it's kind of like hearing your voice echo, in a
Yes.
Zoom meeting or on the phone or something. It just throws off it makes you like seasick almost,
Yeah.
where you're like, orient.
That's exactly what it is. So I don't practice unplugged whenever I can avoid it. And if I have to do something which is fast and involves a lot of like really quick left hand movement, I'm
Well,
not
that's
going
a
to. I'm going to put this on, and it's not for me to play clean. I can play perfectly clean without that. But what I
right.
can't do is get accurate feedback from the guitar when I'm unplugged.
I just never thought of using a fret wrap like that. I don't. I keep one. I've got a Petrucci back there, 7. That's for all the shred stuff, and I keep it in the behind the nut because it's good for damping harmonics. But I like to use open strings a lot, so I never really find a use for it. But that's a different thing I could apply it to. That's like
Yeah,
really, really.
and that
That's
takes some of the anxiety away, right? Because you're not worried now. You can focus on: am I actually hearing the notes that I want to hear, the ones that are supposed to be on the strings,
right.
right? Rather than am I worried about all this extra noise, right?
Mhm.
Like so that for me was a big thing in helping me to let go, you know. And there were a couple of other things that helped. I got a really nice headless guitar in about 2015, 2016, and
Mhm.
one of the things
It's
was
about when I had one. I had a Strandberg.
yeah, I have it's a Canton is the brand that I have. It's a custom built, and I don't usually use it when I'm teaching because it's so different from what everybody else usually has. You know that it's
Mhm.
like it just makes bad visual, but I was able to tell myself, well, I've no excuses now. The guitar is not the problem. You know, the guitar is perfect. You know,
Yeah.
and you know, so those kinds of things were like it took me. I one of the things I realized, I'd actually like you to try this for me if you can.
Sure.
So, how fast do you think your body moves? What do you think your maximum picking speed is?
I haven't thought about it in so long since I've been dealing with this issue, but I don't know. Maybe in the 200 somewhere.
All right, let's try this. I'm going to share a link with you, okay?
Hmm.
And I want you to try this. You don't have to share your screen or anything. I just want you to try it while you're on the call, if you can.
Hmm.
Okay, so I'm going to bring up the chat here. Now, this is a spacebar test, and the goal is very simple. It's mash your spacebar as fast as you can for 10 seconds. Okay? So I don't want you to think music. I don't want you to think guitar technique. I want you to think that there is a high score and you're going to win $50,000 if you can break it. Just go as fast as you can for 10 seconds.
Okay, let's try it. Can you start it with the spacebar, or do you have to click? Because
You can
there's got to
start it
be
with the
that.
spacebar.
Okay, yeah, there's that little lag of. Let's refresh that. I wasn't sure. Using the right hand, I guess, or
Your
does it
picking
even
hand,
matter?
yeah, yeah, picking hand.
Yeah. Okay. Ah, crap. This
Try it
feels,
again.
I'm sorry, feels really silly, but
Try it again.
I got 82.
82, 16 notes per second minimum. Faster than Paul Gilbert has ever picked on a record. That is your neurological speed. You could get that out of a picking technique if you wanted to.
So you mean because of the 8.2 per second is with an up down is
There's
16?
with an up down, you would basically double that. Yeah,
Yeah, because it is sort of a jackhammer. You're only going down a
exactly
pecking.
down. So one thing I tell people as well is like if you're like I don't know if you can see my hands here. If you're practicing picking technique, right? A drummer gets two hands and we have up and down. So you shouldn't be thinking of picking technique as whatever you think. You should be thinking the fastest 16th note roll that you can get out of the guitar, out of your hands, that you can sustain forever. That's your picking speed. That's what you can keep in time.
Yeah.
And that sounds, to most
Man, you
people,
make me
that's
want to pick
much
up some.
faster than they're picking, right? So one of the
Yeah.
I genuinely thought that I had reached my genetic potential for speed at about the age of 16. I was like, well, I'm picking, 210, 220. My fretting hand does this much speed. That's probably where I am, and Sean Lane and Rusty Cooley and these other people are just genetically faster than me. Nope. No, they're not. That spacebar test, I have hit well over 90 notes in 10 seconds. Um,
Well, and I thought the same thing too, because you'd hear guys like Rusty Cooley and you would think, or Sean Lane, and you're like, okay, can they just hear faster than me? But you said something interesting that I thought about too, which is like, well, this is as fast as I can get my internal clock to line up to.
yes, that's a different skill, and this is about relating your chunking, right? So, say for example,
Yeah.
these rudiments, right? Like when I train this pattern here, say like just even a six, simple six, right? When I'm playing that, I have no control over anything but the first note.
Right. They're coming by too fast. So you're just thinking of
I'm thinking six. I'm thinking
no,
this rudiment, this six. Does that make sense? They're
but
coming
you're
out
not
of
thinking of 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. You're thinking of like where all the ones land, right?
yeah, just the ones,
Yeah.
right? And I
Yeah.
have an accent with my pick and an accent with my finger to let me line that up, right?
Mhm.
So if I'm doing the sevens, all I'm thinking about is that first note. And when I do this note, which was 4, 5, and 6, the only thing I can think about is the first note, right?
Hmm.
So the
So
point
it's
is,
just aligning that one to each, maybe
yes,
downbeat, whatever
yeah.
intentional.
Or what I can do is I can establish a rate of speed in my hands, right? Like get used to playing this as 16th note triplets, let's say, and then change the rudiment but keep the speed the same, right? So that I'm letting my sense of movement and my sense of time connect,
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
right?
Gotcha.
So I'm not thinking of if I could only think in terms of where the ones are, this note would always be septuplets. But it's not always septuplets. It's whatever I want it to be. I just find the rate by establishing a movement speed with a rudiment that I like that helps me to synchronize, and then I just keep the hand speed that I'm using and continue.
Right. That makes total sense.
Yeah? So like if I wanted to play 16th note triplets, right, with something which is very, very fast, I would probably start with something in six and get the six on the beat, right? And then I
Yeah.
can switch to 7 note groupings, 9 note groupings, 12 note groupings, whatever I like, 8 note groupings, doesn't matter. Alternating groupings, fours, fives, sixes, and whatever, right? Fives, okay? Like that one that I was just doing. And all I did was establish the speed in my body using one rudiment as my click finder, essentially,
Right.
right?
Right.
And then, since I know then what the speed feels like at that tempo, I just keep going,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, you have that
Rather than
down.
thinking, yeah, rather than thinking about like if I'm playing seven as 16th note triplets, which note is going to land on the beat? Well, I don't know.
Mhm.
I'm just going to find it and then I'm going to continue in time the same way that I had been. And if it gets a little bit floaty, which everybody who plays fast enough for long enough gets a bit floaty. You can hear it on record. Nobody stays perfectly synchronized forever. But the point
And
is,
it's cool. It
so
sounds cool. It's
yeah.
human.
But the point is that I was this is establishing my connection in time to the movement, and then the movement just goes. It just continues, right?
Right.
So like my father's a drummer. He's actually a very good drummer, and one of the things he always like he's kind of like a drum shaman. He doesn't say a whole lot about things that make sense, but then you think about it and then you realize that he was right all along, that kind of way. And
Yeah.
one of the things he always told me is that if you want to groove, you have to move, which is why every bass player on earth bobs their head.
This is something I tell my students all the
Yeah,
time.
you,
Yeah.
you have to internalize groove. But the thing is, as a and guitar players are notorious for having crap time, right?
Hmm.
Like it's just absolutely terrible time. And the reason is because we don't internalize a pendulum. So one of the things I teach people is, that's my pendulum. As long as that keeps moving, I'm never going to lose time.
Well, the other thing that I've noticed is that students they just don't know. I mean, it's just really obvious things, but it's like you turn on a metronome. What's the first thing that they do is they start going. They look at the metronome, and you're like, you
Oh
can't
God,
see
no,
time.
yeah, it's terrible. It's the worst possible. It's the worst possible thing, And like I had, like I wish I could teach that. I don't know how to do it. I had bad time as a teenager, and my father recognized it. And being a drummer, he insisted on fixing it. And it was basically just a case of I wasn't able to do it until I could do it, and then I could do it perfectly.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know how it happened. I really don't. It was just it came on like a light switch, you know.
You mean just stay in time and kind of be aware of your time and
To feel it on a body level rather than counting. You know what I mean?
yeah. I feel like playing music that feels good helps you do that. Like
I,
in
I think
guitar
so
players
too. I
we
think so
want to
too.
play Petrucci and stuff like that, but like play some James Brown and you can't help but just kind of feel it,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
or like any Nile Rodgers rhythm part. Like it's just
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
you
yeah, yeah. Well,
you
dancers know this
like
stuff. You know
you're
what I mean?
gonna start like shaking your hips and your shoulders just while you play it. It's hard not to if you're actually
Right.
playing it properly. You start internalizing it everywhere, and like I really think you need to connect your sense of movement and your sense of time. And once you do that, and you can establish your connection to the click through some easy rudiment, something which is in like got a natural four or a natural six or something like that, then you just continue at the same speed.
Yeah.
All right. So that's kind of how I would approach it. But one of the things I needed to do was convince myself that my body was actually faster than it was. And that like those kind of like tapping tests were a big thing. Just kind of like realizing that no, actually I can tap a table at, what would translate to 18 notes a second or maybe even a little bit faster. Sean Lane wasn't a faster person than me. He was a faster guitar player because he had learned how to get
His tech.
his biological speed, the speed that we all have onto the guitar. I
Yeah.
have not given that spacebar test to anyone who hasn't scored more than 15 on their first attempt,
Hmm.
right? Now that
Yeah.
doesn't make sense if we're all speed limited to 12 notes per second or whatever we think it is. It just doesn't,
Right.
right?
Right.
So you kind of need to like give yourself permission to miss, and this absolutely helped with that. Was just giving me permission to miss, and then because there isn't like an element of um, it depends on the day. Some days your muscles are tired, or your blood sugar is low, or whatever. Maybe there's a little bit of variation at the upper level. Maybe some days it's I can get 270 beats per minute out of my picking hand, and some days maybe it's maybe I cap out at 240. That's where I am for the day, right?
Right.
But the point is,
Right.
it's way higher than wherever you think it is. Your biological limit is much higher, much higher, right?
Sure.
Also, another reason I have this, which genuinely this is a big reason, is because this guitar, again, the action is super low, and it gives me somewhere to put a pick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like really that is because the action on this guitar is so low I can't fit a jazz 3 underneath the strings.
Oh, well.
Yeah. So the stated action that they tell you what this is on the website is 1.5 at the low E and 1 at the high E. It's lower than that. When I got this, it was set up for 1 at the low E and zero point 0.7 at the high E.
Wow.
So,
That's insane.
that the forces involved in playing this guitar are super low. But, I can play a guitar with, tens just fine. I just wouldn't be able to do all of the same stuff, because the force output would go up.
I made a note of that insane action so I could try to get my Petrucci down there somewhere because it's not quite where I want it, but
But,
um,
like, yeah, and then this fretboard is completely flat. It's like a classical guitar. There's no radius. So
right.
so that means that the action can be as low as possible um, without any issue. And because it doesn't have a truss rod, it has a graphite rod, a carbon rod running in through the neck. The neck can never move. So they set it once at the factory, and then that's it for the rest of time. It's
It's amazing.
yeah, and like um, because I used to like I had an Ibanez Gem when I was younger. It's a lovely guitar. I still have it upstairs, but it was a little bit seasonal, and I don't know what weather's like where you are, but in Ireland it gets pretty cold in winter, as in down to close to freezing, close to zero, and
Hmm.
0 centigrade, which would be about like 32 for you. Is that right?
Yeah.
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 And then in summer it doesn't get very hot, but it gets very humid. So the uh, the
Yeah.
humidity really does change, cause guitar necks to move an awful lot. So I used to have to like do a lot of different setups and try to get everything really well balanced, and this one just doesn't care. It just it's exactly the same every day, which is brilliant. And that again, the idea of having no excuses. The guitar is not the problem anymore. The problem is if I can't do something, it's my hands, or it's my approach, or my it's something else. It's not this. That really does help me. You know.
Same. Yeah. I
Yeah.
definitely try to go for that. Yeah, because you can chase your tail on guitar setup for,
Oh,
and I've
sure,
done.
and tone as well was a big one for me. Where I
Yeah.
wasted an awful lot of time that I should have been practicing worrying about like you know um, amp settings and things like that. And the reality is that your pick has so much more impact. Your picking has so much more impact on your tone than anything you're going to do. Like if you pick like Paul Gilbert, you're going to sound like Paul Gilbert.
That very dynamic, yeah,
You can't
accented.
help it. And if you pick like Eric Johnson, you'll sound like Eric Johnson.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
like it's not learning how to make tone through contact rather than signal processing was a big thing for me as well. Because that then got me excited to practice other elements of technique like note shaping and dynamics and stuff like that.
Man, this kind of stuff's been so interesting and helpful, and it's sad because you see, I mean, I don't have a membership on Cracking the Code, but it seems like from the previews I've seen of like um, the Cyrec interview, or like I've seen the video of Victor Wooten has this, and I actually contacted him recently, like last week, and he said, "Yeah, I'm still not cured," right?
Mm.
But he has videos out there of him talking about this, and like they don't really, they have like no solutions. They just cope. Like my cope right now is I got to play like Django, and I just use my first two fingers, but of course that
But
limits so much of what I can do. But
what
it's
what
like you've
I
already got this stuff cracked, you know?
what I would like you to do is just shake out your hands, find your hand at rest, and just get it on the guitar. Don't set up. Don't look at your hand. Don't and really feel, like really focus on what do I feel with my fingertips. Does that make sense? Like, not what
Feedback.
does
Yeah,
it look
yeah.
like? What does it feel like? Right? Right now, I can tell you what string I'm on. I can give you an approximation as to what fret I'm on based on how far apart the frets are.
Right,
I can't
right.
tell you exactly, but I can give you an approximation, right? And where my elbow is relative to my body, right? The only time I need to look at the guitar is if I'm sliding from very low to very high. And I need to, so if I was going from the third fret to the 15th fret, I would check very quickly. Yeah.
Right.
But
Yeah, just glance
if
down maybe.
if other than that, no, my visual attention is on something else.
Yeah.
And I can navigate the guitar completely on feel. I know how all of my fretboard shapes connect. I know how far I'm going to be moving. If I never break contact with the guitar, I never need to look at the guitar. The
Right.
touch tells me everything. And I think that I think that obsessing like this wrist position and this hand position that you've come, there's no way you ever thought that was comfortable. You have trained yourself into thinking that that's the right way to play because you created this pressure for yourself to have the smallest movement and to have all of the fingers available at all times and to have finger independence. And the
Yeah,
reality
it's
is that it just those are not real things. Those are not real
right.
things. Okay? And like, you've heard that I'm pretty silly fast. I never think about economy of motion. Ever. Not once. I think about economy of motions. What's cheap? What's available? Does that make sense?
Mm,
What's
right.
available? If I can't get a pick stroke in, can I get my middle finger to hybrid pick? If I can't get my middle finger into hybrid pick, can I do a hammer on from nowhere? You know, is there an alternative? Is there a cheap alternative? Is there copper instead of buying more gold? You know,
Right.
right?
Right.
And that then you feel like anything is accomplishable. And that's great. Like I'm not fully there yet because I've only figured out this Sean Lane stuff and how to move my hands really, really stupid fast and the Sean Lane picking movement and everything in the last 2 years or so. Um, but you know, imagine I discovered this at 14, 15.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm thinking is like
Add 20
where were you
years to
at
it.
in
Add 20
guitar world?
years. Yeah. So anyone would look at me and think I was a miracle. They would think I was like a genetic freak, the way people talk about Sean Lane, the way people talk about, Holsworth, like, oh, he's an alien. No, he's just really
Uh,
good.
well, he's just figured this stuff out on a more unconscious level. He probably
Exactly.
couldn't tell you. That's your real talent, if you don't mind me saying. I mean, not to take away from your playing, but like no one else, as a teacher. I mean,
Mm,
it's a lot harder to teach, I feel like, than it is to play. Because I've sat down with guys like, Scott Henderson, Tosin Abasi, all these guys. I don't want to name names on who was good and who wasn't, but like the teaching is just not really there because they don't really know how they're doing what they're doing. But you've taken this to like you can actually explain what you're doing,
mm.
you know? Where I
And
mean, something like you said, just be sloppy, but there's still a lot of stuff to unpack there.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
it's but here's the interesting thing too. Like if you watch interviews with these people, they always say something which is insightful and meaningful, and then they follow it up with something which is wrong, okay? Which is
yeah,
just not true. It's not what they're doing. You can break it down on a high-speed camera and say, no, that's not what you're doing, right? So
right.
I don't know if you've ever seen Total Electric Guitar, Johnson's first instructional video, but there's this
Yeah,
bit
yeah,
where
yeah.
he's talking about his picking technique, and he
Eric
talks about the
teaching.
bounce, the bounce. And he says the idea of the bounce comes in when you're playing fast. No, Eric, the idea of the bounce goes away when you're playing fast. I have broken down every frame on that video. I can tell you the bounce doesn't exist when you play fast. It doesn't. Or another thing is he talks about circle picking and how it comes in when he plays fast. No, Eric, it goes away when you play fast. You do it when you play slowly, and you dial it out as you go faster. Another like there's other things as well. Like Sean Lane shows one pattern in Powerlicks, his first instructional video, where he's saying this pattern is good for finger independence, and it's not. It doesn't train finger independence at all. And the reason it doesn't train finger independence at all is because it's exactly the same digital sequencing in terms of what his fingers are doing as all of the other licks on the bloody series,
Hmm.
right? So the reason Sean Lane was fast is that he figured out that your body can do 1 2 4 1 2 4 1 2 4 that 1 2 4 1 2 4 1 2 4 1 2 4 extremely quickly. You can get that up to 16th note triplets at 180, 190, and that's not going to be, beyond the realms of possibility, right? And then
Hmm.
all he did was he decided, okay, instead of 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 all on the same string, it's do 1 2 3, but just change the notes you're playing. So instead of 1 2 3 1 1 2 4 that's 15 notes, but it's really 5 3s. 1 2 3. But that for my left hand, that's 1 2 4 1 2 4 1 2 4 over and over again,
Right, right.
right?
And that's
So
back to that rudiment thing. So
sorry,
I said, and that's kind of back to that rudiment concept
yeah.
of a
So
kernel of
it's the kernel of everything that Sean Lane did was 1 2 4 or 4 2 1, and repeating that, but changing the notes that you're playing while doing that, not staying for 3 notes on one string. You instead of going like say instead of going, you could go and put the hammer onto the neck. So that there is like 4 2 1 4 2 1. So it's like this, but that's hammer-ons from nowhere, one note per string, and it's like silly fast and it's easy.
yeah, yeah.
So that would be a rudiment that I would play without picking. 4 4 2 1 4 2 1. So it's as fast as anything else that I can play because it's that pattern 4 2 1 4 2 1 4 2 1. All right.
Hmm.
So like knowing how it works is like I didn't figure this out intuitively. I wasn't Sean Lane. I didn't realize that this is what fast playing felt like when I was 15, and then just fit everything around it. But I
Right.
did know very early on that this was easy. Sixes was easy.
Yeah, and I've always noticed how much easier 1 2 4 is than 1 3 4.
Yeah, this is horrible. But this is
Yeah, and
fine.
that's what I do is overtrain that because I'm like, well, that must be a weakness. So I'll just keep working on 1 3 4.
But the reality is that 1 3 4 is bad because it is bad. It's just anatomically less good,
Right, right.
right? Whereas 1 2 3 is pretty good if you let your pinky just hang loose.
Yeah, and that you said I did it in the video. It's not something I ever really thought about consciously. So that again, that just goes to show the power of just kind of letting your body figure it out for you, which
Mm,
is so my brain's in the way of that process for
yeah.
sure. And
So like again, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if the condition is more complicated than I understand. It may well be, but I think shake out, let yourself feel your hand resting and find the guitar. Don't think about setting up into a posture or anything like that. That's not what I want. Okay, that would be, I think, completely counterproductive. I don't want you to
Right.
obsess about what your resting hand looks like. Just be familiar with the concept and shake out, get onto the guitar and start playing and let your body feel that. Yeah?
Well, thank you, man. I really appreciate it. I hate to run on you, but I know you were saying you only had about 2 hours and we went.
Yeah, so but do you know what? I'll stop this recording here